please remember that when things get rough, you can always leave over there and come here to Sankofa Books and sit down and relax. Because this is the liberation space and the liberation zone.
Queens of poetry. I don't know if that's the proper word now. I'll let her explain it because we always redefining that which is us. So I'm going to take the time to start. The person wasn't here to do this, so I will engage. One of the hats I wear is a minister from the Temple of Heru Aket, which is coming out of our now Valley tradition. But I wanted to take the time because, you know, before we start any program, we always acknowledge the ancestors. So, is everybody here familiar with libation? Is everybody here familiar with libation? Sisters in the back, up here in front.
Do we have to take our shoes off?
No, you don't have to take your shoes off. But if you want to kneel, whatever you want to do to acknowledge, you can do that because it's a participatory aspect. And what we want to do when we do libation, I always tell people to recognize that you are part of a larger family. You're part of the living, the yet unborn, and those who have gone to the other side in the spirit world. And whenever we have an event, we call everybody to the community, everybody in the community to the event. So not only do we just talk about our popular ancestors, but we talk about the people right in your family. But a lot of times we forget, you know. And we like to call on the honorable ancestors. You know, Uncle JoJo may not make this one, you know. or Mama Tom Tom, or whoever it may be. We want to honor those who are honorable. We acknowledge those who have gone past, but the ones we want to call to come to celebrate and feast with us are the honorable ancestors. So what we do, I know some people are not familiar, so I'm not going to assume, huh?
It's a bowl and a glass. And
Okay. The plant represents the earth from which we've come and which we will return our physical form. And the water represents the spirit. And for those who may not know what libation is, on the street level, if y'all saw the movie Cooley High, when the brothers was breaking off, from their little cap, they threw it on the ground first and said, these are for the brothers that's not here, right? So even in our state of Ma'afa, we still held on to certain symbolisms that was a part of our culture. So we like to take the time and we want to get you involved in calling out your ancestors. So what I want to do, I'm going to pour a drop of water and I want you to call forth one of your ancestors that you would like to just come and celebrate with us as we partake in this festivity. Okay, you just keep calling them out, and I'm gonna keep pouring them as you call them out. Ashe. 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 Ashe Hotel. Ashe. Ashe Hotel. Ashe Hotel. Ashe Hotel. Ashe Hotel. Ashe Hotel.
Brother DeGraff Johnson.
Ashe Hotel. Ashe Hotel. Ashe Hotel.
Brother David Walker.
Ashe Hotel. Ashe Hotel. Queen and Zinger. Ya Santawa.
Frederick Douglass.
Ashe Hotel.
Martin Lane.
Rosa Fitzgerald. Jesse
George
Fitzgerald.
Coates.
All those Africans whose bones lie at the bottom of the Atlantic Ocean.
Ashe Hotel. That's usually when I say it for last, but since she just said it, we're going to use this bit to acknowledge all the brothers and sisters and family that were lost in the Ma'afa, so-called Holocaust of enslavement, that did not make it to this other side. Ashe Hotel.
Good afternoon. Tensei did this. What is this? All to Sankofa Video Books and more. And as I shared with some of the folk who were here a few weeks ago, today is a part of our The More. We are here for a very, very, very special reason. You all are here for a very special reason and for a very special person. And I'm grateful to each of you for being here. And I want to thank you personally, and I want to thank you on behalf of Shuikiana and Haile Garima and the Sankofa family for being here. I want to ask your forgiveness for us getting started a little late. We wanted to make sure that everything was as good as we could make it under the circumstances. So I'm here to do a little housekeeping, if you will. So we're going to start off with, if you have a cell phone, please for the next hour and a half, put your cell phones on mute or turn it off. Tell the folk you're busy, and so that when the artists come up to greet us, they won't be interrupted with the cell phones. Also want to apologize to you all for all of the construction that we have going on. And we're in the process of making this place even more wonderful than it already is. And so please pardon the construction, and know that the love is here, and we greet you in that same name and in that same love. We are going to proceed with our program that we have here to honor Sister Laini Mataka. Looking forward to this. Really want to embed in this, and in each of us, that this is our first annual Laini Mataka Day. That we're going to, exactly, yeah. Definitely a round of applause. She is so deserving of our honor. And for those of you who are here and who haven't quite heard her, she is a powerful queen. And so she is definitely going to enlighten you. And for those of you who've already heard her, you know. And so without further ado, we're going to ask the next person to come up who is going to greet us. And I have the program, so I have to see who that is very quickly. Give me a second.
Good afternoon, everyone. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Ignacio Opari. I'm a prime priest, and I've been given the honor to call upon and recognize the manifestations of the Creator's energy, the Albasoon and Samantho, for this very special day. So I'm very honored to be able to do this for my sister. She's been a part of my life for a while, and I'm very glad that you all are doing this today. This is really nice. This is really nice. I'll be pouring the libation in Tree, which is indigenous language of the Akan people in West Ghana. I will be acknowledging God Almighty, manifestation of God's energy, and our ancestors. When I get to the part where we're calling on ancestors, I will ask you if you would like to call on some ancestors to please do so. I go. Also, the bedroom son on. Shango bedroom son on. Daddy Kofi bedroom son on. Nana Kumi bedroom son on. Eshe bedroom son on. Densia bedroom son on. Monty bedroom son on. Nana Ese bedroom son on. Nana Yene bedroom son on. Akwasi Pound bedroom son on. Ta Kofi bedroom son on. Over Kwete bedroom son on. Tigre bedroom son on. Kwete and Kwete bedroom son on. Nana Ama Jenny bedroom son on. Nana Yao Opari Denise Olu bedroom son on. Nana Yao Ojuma Opari bedroom son on. Nana Kuya Pea Bea bedroom son on. Kofi Save Queen bedroom son on. Like to call some ancestors, please do so at this time. Bedin Sano, 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 Bedin Sano. Abasun and Yina, Bedin Sano, Intimanfo Yina, Bedin Sano. Oh, Abasun and Intimanfo, we have called upon you today to thank you. To thank you for all the blessings that you have granted us for this day. To thank you for the opportunity to come together in love. To thank you for the opportunity to come together in respect. To thank you today for coming together in peace. We thank you for this special day where we get an opportunity to thank you for sending us one of your children, Laini Mataka. We thank you for the way in which you show up through her. We thank you for the way in which you show up through your love. We thank you for the way in which you show up there with your words. We thank you for the way in which you show up with your expressions. We thank you for the way in which you show up through her with the vision that she sees. We thank you for the way in which she shows up with the ways in which she can express and manifest the goodness that you have sent her. We thank you for the way in which you show up because of her beauty and her grace. We thank you for the way in which you show up there for her givingness. We thank you for the way in which you show up her with all the ways in which she touches our hearts. It is a special blessing for us today to share this time and this space and this energy with one of your children, our sister, your child, our sister, your child. It is a blessing for us to be able to hear the way in which you speak through her, hear the way in which you talk through her, hear the way in which you shape the world and mold it through her vision, which is your vision. We are grateful for this opportunity. We come together combined in love and energy. For there's nothing more powerful than the energy of love, for love is you. And we are gathered together and magnify this energy twice more. And we ask that all of this and much more shines down upon this daughter. May all of the creativity that you have for her be manifested through her on this day and every day. May all the blessings that you have for her in the way in which you want to show her be manifested through her today and always. May all the grace and the love that everyone has brought here through this room not only shower upon Laini, but shower upon each and every one of us. May everyone take some of the grace. For when you give, you get it. And you have given much to many, and all of this comes back in graceful and in love. We are so grateful for this. We are so grateful for the words. We are so grateful for the opportunity. For whenever we come together, it should always be in this manner to express love for your children, to express love for you. The doctor for this day, may we each, everyone take from us all the love and the blessings that you have bestowed upon each and every one of us. And may we all hold in our lives every day the blessings for each other. And for this day in particular, the blessings for Laini, your daughter. We hold her in our heart always, for she can always be only the best that she already is.
Thank you so much, my sister. And on behalf of Sankofa Video Bookstore, we also want to embrace the moment in a very special way. We are very happy to have all of you here and to have this opportunity to thank and embrace one of our special owned sisters. And I think that I would like to congratulate people who designed this idea, because it's not often enough that we have the good sense to do this while this special person is still in our midst. So on behalf of those that thought of that, and let me just thank those that did. I mean, Aza, you were a big part of that. And Afro Lynch, and you know, so I think I'm very happy to be a part of it. And I'd like to say that my own experience with Laini, I met her, I guess it was 4 or 5 years ago, and we were at, for the first time, when we were at a sweat lodge. And I had never met her before, and you know, we were going down to be with some sisters that we felt very warmly about, and we were actually including a ceremony that would, well, we began to include the young women, you know, in discussion about rites of passage and growing older. And anyway, it was a wonderful occasion for me to come in contact with Laini. Not having heard her poetry or read her poetry, but on a very personal level, and to, you know, sister to sister, to really, really appreciate her from that side. And then when I came in contact with her poetry, okay, I was just blasted away. I said, okay, this is why this sister makes so much sense, because her poetry is, you know, is the way that she takes her experience and makes it available for the rest of the world to relate to. And I'm very, very personally appreciative of that. So I, again, thank you for coming to be a part of this with us. I think everybody's probably got their own stories about Laini. And this is not a roast. So we'll have to plan that part of it later. So thank you again on behalf of Sankofa Video and Bookstore.
Peace, everyone.
Yes,
Microphone seems loud up here. How are y'all doing today?
sir.
My name is Bomani Arma. I've been living in this neighborhood for a while. I've been doing poetry, spoken word venues, all up and down Georgia Avenue, 14th Street, U Street. I didn't know this sister. I've read her poetry before, and did not know it was her. We worked together at Martha's table for a while in different areas. But I seen her live things that like I later read in her poetry, and it became even realer. And I listen to a lot of poetry, I host events. So I listen to a lot of poetry, and a lot of people want to get the oohs and the ahs from the crowd and want to make people laugh and feel upset sometimes and get people to jump. You know what I'm saying? And she does that consistently in every poem and all of her books. It's a incredible talent that you see people trying to imitate but can't quite meet. And I'm really honored. I was honored that Azza asked me to come up here and read, and then I was doubly honored that she asked me to read this particular piece. This piece is called "Somebody's Always Bad-Mouthing Black Men." Somebody's always bad-mouthing black men, and most of what they say is true. But it's not true about most black men. This is a praise song here. Hum a little Billy Harper to it if you want. But out of my heart, which ain't no easy place, I give thanks for the births of all black men, brown and beige brothers who struggled to get out of the birth canal and have since never tried to re-enter. Give thanks to all brothers who know and have always known the value of a family as opposed to dropping seeds in every reachable field of glory. Give thanks to all the brothers who accompany their women into the delivery rooms to witness and participate in the positive welcoming of their newborn into this world. Give thanks to brothers who actively join in controlling births and preventing diseases. Give thanks to brothers who work unbelievably fucked up jobs to secure the needs of their family, especially the ones who thought about running but never could. Give thanks to brothers who cook and clean and change diapers without fear of their dicks falling off. Give thanks to brothers who take care of their children. Give thanks for brothers who are actively involved in the development of their children, who know their highs and lows, their likes and dislikes. Special thanks to the brothers who manage this irregardless of the relationships with the mothers. Give thanks to brothers who save other brothers' harvest, who take the mother and therefore take the children, whether they are liked by them or not. These brothers don't come in masses, but there are many enough to mention. Give thanks to brothers who have no children, but who treat all our children like they are really ours. And instead of worrying about them about when of fatherhood, we should be grateful for the love they do share. Give thanks for brothers who love and respect their mothers and therefore love and respect black womanhood. Give thanks to brothers who let a woman be herself without trying to mold her or shape her into a piss-poor imitation of a white girl. Give thanks to brothers who like women they sleep with and don't sleep with women they don't like. Give thanks for brothers who have taken the time and care to patch up the injuries in the hearts of sisters who ran head on into the wrong nigga. Give thanks for brothers who let black women be their friends without trying to seduce them farther on down the road. Give thanks to brothers who don't take advantage of women, even when they know they can. Pass up opportunities to pimp, no matter how available they may be. Give thanks to brothers who never raise their hands against a woman. Let me just back up and give them some more thanks on that. Give thanks to brothers who oppose rape first in their hearts and who defend black women without having to know them. I'm talking about those stalking moments when a sister asked unknown brothers to walk with them or watch them to their cars, when the average blood who gives her the coverage without a pause. Give thanks to the brothers who resist and do resist enslavement through drugs and for the lesser heroes. Give thanks also for those who are enslaved but yet warn others about the wicked possibilities. Give thanks for brothers who love bros without fear of freakiness. Give thanks to bros who tell police nothing yesterday, today, and tomorrow. Divine thanks to those who die and have died. Then, let me say this one right. Divine thanks to those who will die and have died rather than betray black secrets. Give thanks to brothers who receive fame and yet remain beautifully true to the race and its image. Give thanks for brothers who self-employed and the inspiration they give us as we struggle to be self-reliant. And give thanks everlasting to any and all bros who have paid the extravagant cost of being bros, no matter how high the bill. Thank you very much.
I know this is Laini's moment, but I was asked to say what I want to say. I'm Paul Coates from Black Classic Press. We are Laini's publisher, and we've published Laini, her first book, her second, her third, and her fourth book. We're working on a fifth book.
All right.
So I want to say a few words about Laini, but actually before I get started, I really have to stop and I know it's your day, but I have to recognize the brother Hannibal. who is here with us. I just want y'all to know that we have a warrior in our presence. We have a fighter. We have someone who has devoted his life really to struggling for black folks. And this man travels, are you in Mississippi now, brother? He's in Mississippi now. But originally out of Chicago, and I remember many, many years ago meeting this brother and meeting his name actually, because his name precedes him, his work with the young folks, his work in Chicago, and throughout the African community is such that we're just honored to have you with us at this occasion for Laini. So I just want to just acknowledge you and thank you, brother. Laini. When in 1978, when I first considered, actually it was 1978, 1977, when I first considered organizing Black Classic Press, because I came up knowing the importance of black people being able to control their words and publish their words, I talked with Laini. She was one of the people I talked with. Laini was living in Baltimore at that time. And I remember talking with Laini, and Laini said, because she's, a people for our community, she said, good, now you can publish all of my books. And I said, okay, that's what we'll do, we'll publish all of your books. And I took that commitment to Laini in 77 before we founded the press in 78. I didn't know what we were going to publish. It so happened that our focus became publishing out of print books for, by, and about people of African descent, out of print books. That was our that is our focus, and it became our focus. But I had made this commitment to Laini to do her books, always do her books. And we still live in that commitment. Many people have come to us and they say, like, do you publish poetry? We said, we don't publish poetry. They said, but you publish Laini. I want to distinguish two things. I call Laini's words poetry, but I've never really considered them poetry. It's like the way Laini's words that we know as poetry are like, to me, it's like her fighting in the world for us. It's like a sword, a shield, a gun, whatever you want. She gives birth to words that represent us, words that I would never be able to say, words that many of us would never be able to say, and she brings them together in such a way that they have presence in the world, and they represent and they stand for us. And I know poetry is supposed to do some of that, maybe it does. I've never been the poet person, but I've always loved Laini's words, always loved Laini's words. Back in the day, those who know Laini know that she used to be a great recording artist. Yes, as Wanda or whatever. She used to be Wanda Robinson. And I fell in love with Laini then. And she knows that. I mean, I've always loved her. But I wasn't publishing then. We publish out of this real special relationship because I know who she is in the world. And I just, first of all, I gotta do this too. Let me back up for 1 minute. I have to say that this is like a real great occurrence, right? Because as a warrior, it's just like I was acknowledging Brother Hannibal, our warriors don't get acknowledged enough, And so for Laini to be acknowledged today and to talk about it's going to be an annual day that we acknowledge our warriors, like I know how great she is. And so for other people to have that opportunity to tell her how great and to recognize her, I just think this is just so wonderful. But even in knowing how great she is, I have to tell y'all, that's not the only reason I'm up for publishing anything. And when I say anything, I mean anything Laini writes. We just need to fit it in the budget and it will get done. But that's because she's great and because she puts these words out as a warrior is not the only reason. Y'all have to understand that Laini calls me up and she seduces me on the phone, okay? She seduces me on the phone. She'll say, Paul, I just wrote this. Do you have a moment to listen to me, And what can I say? But of course I do. Whatever I'm doing, I have to stop. And then she leaves me speechless. So I get first dibs on these words that she's creating so often. And it has just made my life that much fuller, that much more meaningful. And it has made me that much more able to be in the world to deal with the folks that I deal with on our behalf. Laini, thank you very much for being the word person that you are, for being the voice that you are, for being the just unmovable stand in our behalf that you are. We wish you long years. We wish you, long words and joy. Thank you, Dave.
You sure this isn't a roast? I'm Kwame Alexander, and I've been involved in poetry for 36 years. I'm 37 years old. Since I was a 1-year-old sitting at the East in Brooklyn, New York, 11 o'clock at night with my mother and father, listening to Baraka and Sonia Sanchez and Haki, and not really understanding what was going on, but that being, a part of my early development. Laini is a literographer of pain and hope. If you read Kwame Nkrumah's speeches, you see a poeticness. If you read Ed Weeds Danticat's critically acclaimed novels, you see a lyricism. All of this starts in poetry. And I say that, Paul, to say that Laini is a poet, but she is something else. She is a good poet. She is a poet who can write well. She is a poet who, on stage, makes you want to weep and holler. She does all of that. And I've had the pleasure to know her since the early 90s when I first arrived in the DC area. And, seeing Laini in the poetry coffee houses, and back then there was a place in the Southeast called 8 Rock that we all went to. Right now there's a poetry open mic going on every night, sometimes 2 per day, and they're everywhere, like the brother Bomani mentioned, U Street, Georgia Avenue, and so forth. But one of the things that I remember about Laini is that myself and some of the other poets would always be just inspired by her words. And then when we left, we'd maybe go up to the sister and say something. And Laini has a little, how shall I say this? She's got a little fire about her, And that can be, misconstrued into, she got attitude. Or like we used to say, that sister mean. But what I discovered is that sometimes you have to have a fire that people misconstrue as meanness to separate all the BS, because there's a lot of that in this world. Every time I've called on her to be a part of anything that I've done, she's really come out strong and been very supportive and been a participant, a valued participant. And I remember specifically an event that I produced in 1998 called 360, A Revolution of Black Poets. And she stood on stage in front of about 300 people. And Laini, like Nikki Giovanni, like a lot of poets, just doesn't really cares about us as a community, therefore does not care who she offends whatsoever, because it's about a growth and a learning process. And so she stood up in front of 368 people, and I remember the number because that's how many seats were in the audience when we signed the contract to do the event, and it was packed. And she said some things about poets, about poets, Poets like to hear us poets talk about other things, but when you start talking about what we should be doing as poets, we get a little, hey. But she said some things about poets at open mics and what they should be doing and what they ain't doing. And in a way that inspired this piece that I'm going to dedicate to you today, called Dancing Naked on the Floor, for Laini Mataka. Write a poem with tension, like some Baptist church split, Let it walk a tightrope between Congregation 1 and Congregation 2. Write a poem that finishes school, a magna cum laude poem. Let it be momentous, learn something meaningful, share something significant. Write a poem that looks good, a Billie Holiday poem, not homely or sway-backed. Give it posture, poise, and profile. Turn our heads when it walks by, stomp our feet when it smiles. On some superficial level, make us want to marry it, or at least remember its name the next morning. Write a poem that works, has a job and does it promptly, follows rules and responsibilities, gets a raise or at least a head nod. And when it's not feeling well, when your poem ain't feeling well, give it sense enough to call in sick and not waste our time with unmet expectations. Write a poem that has a family. Write a poem that has a family, not some single life of soiled one-night stands. I mean, your poem should be in a serious relationship. Let it commit to something. Move beyond soap opera sex. Let it be passionate about something. And if it gets physical, if your poem has to get physical, let it be in the privacy of its own beautiful mind, because we can all watch cable at home. Write a poem that travels. Gets outside your cramped apartment and leaves all that tired baggage, catches a plane somewhere, takes us on a journey to an imagination fueled by study, not television and film, one that has been somewhere we haven't. Write a poem that reads. Please, write a poem that reads more than headlines and sitcom credits, a cultured poem. Write a poem that knows how to talk, not some misbehaving foul mouth looking for attention, an eloquent poem, a gutsy poem. Write a poem that cooks. I mean, it ain't got to bake a cake, but at least know the ingredients. Write a poem that exercises. Cycling is not required, but steps never hurt nobody. Write a poem that runs for office. I mean, it ain't got to win, but at least campaign. Get a clue, poets. Write a poem with an inkling of suspicion. I mean, it ain't got to solve the crime, but at least let it offer us a tip. Write a poem that is contagious. Write a poem that is contagious. Write a poem that is contagious. Let it inspire. Make us want to write a poem about how beautiful and brilliant and breathtaking and tragic and beautiful and brilliant and breathtaking and tragic and hopeful life is. Thank you.
Good morning to everyone. Peace, love, and blessings. You know, I had came over here to do one thing, was to actually play some music behind my cousin's poetry. But as I entered the room and as I was informed and as I was asked, and then the thought came and the process said, yes, I must do this. I now have to be a representative for a family line that she's from.
Right on.
So the energy, the love, the strength, the intensity, all of that you see is what she's given to me since I was born. I am a recipient of this my entire life. Do you know how wonderful that is? Do you hear what I'm saying?
Yeah.
I mean, I'm a young guy. I've done a lot of things. I'll continue to do a lot more. But I've been infused with love, peace, information, awareness, touched by hands of light to inform me that I could be, do, and achieve, conceive every and anything. So that's what I've been doing. I've never lived with a net, but I've never stepped out on a limb without some love and some guidance. And it's been like this my whole life. I've never known anything different. I've never known this energy not to exist in my existence. I didn't know actually where it manifested or how far back in the timeline it had come up to catch up to me. And you look through your family to see who else is like you, or who you're imitating, or who you're liking to. And I couldn't really see anybody, but there was always a light. And there was always a hand saying, little boy, don't do that. Go see your mommy now. And in the process of that, what I also got were a few records, well, this is John Coltrane, this is the Funk Brothers, this is so-and-so. Yeah, I don't want them anymore. Why don't you listen to them? Not knowing that there was a seed being planted. The seed was planted, it was nurtured, it was watered. What you see today is a twig, a strong twig that's got its own roots, its own branches, and has become a small, tender tree. And in the process, it's still growing, and now I've developed families. And I have these branches reaching out into the world that have the same energy. We were able to tap into the genetic code in our family line and bring forth manifestation of spirit, light, love, energy, peace, prosperity, all the things everybody wants. But the reality of getting it is that it goes from one to who it chooses. So we don't make that choice. But we do have to be receptive. And I was receptive to love, to kindness, and I really appreciate the reward that it has brought me, baby. So, with this in mind, I'm going to play a song. I have two songs. I'll give you a choice. One is called You Are Able, one is called Cornbread.
Yeah. You're able and cornbread.
And so it is.
Well, cornbread, you're able.
It goes right back to that love. The cornbread is a memorial to my great-grandmother's cooking. A Sunday morning. In the early Sunday morning, I would wake up and what I would smell was cornbread. And I grew up with it, so I wrote a song about it. Here it is. But I'm gonna hit you with the first song, You Are Able. When you look inside yourself, you can see your true wealth. Life, it can spin you around. What you see is what's going down. From the deck, you will deal seeds of hope, because life is real. Put your cards out on the table, don't give in, because you are able. Put your cards out on the table, don't give in, because you are able. You are able. Yes, you are. You are able. Yes, you are. The lesson we all must learn, that in this life, every day's our turn. What you see is what you get. Be the best, settle for nothing less. I said the lesson we all must learn, that in this life, every day's our turn. What you see is what you get. Be the best at it and nothing less. Put your cards out on the table, don't give in, because you are able. Put your cards out on the table, don't give in, because you are able. You are This is my sing-along song. As I move through the song, you'll all hear where you can sing along and participate. Nothing spells loving like something from the oven. Nothing spells loving like something from the oven. Cornbread, that's what I said. Cornbread, that's what I said. All right, join in now, watch it. C-O-R-N B-R-E-A-D C-O-R-N B-R-E-A-D C-O-R-N B-R-E-A-D Cornbread, it's the one for me. Where is my cornbread? Cornbread, beans and rice, sure sound nice. Sweet potato pie, some collard greens fried, C-O-R-N B-R-E-A-D C-O-R-N, it's the one for me. C-O-R-N B-R-E-A-D Cornbread, where can it be? Where is my cornbread? Cornbread, nothing spells loving like something from the oven. I said nothing, nothing, nothing. Oh, like something from the oven. C-O-R-N B-R-E-A-D Cornbread is the one for me. Where is my cornbread? Where's cornbread? That's what love, nurturing, energy, you know, all of those things bring to you, and you find the tools to help reshape that energy and be able to give it to the world. Because everybody's got a song, you got to search and find your song. However you're going to bring it to us, you got to bring it to us through poetry, through craft, whatever. It's got to be exposed to the world. So the light can become brighter and brighter. I'm not sure how this itinerary is going, so, next, Next. Well, we know that next in this movie, and I thank you for your undivided attention. We're getting ready to do it for real.
Peace and blessings, everyone. My name is Nzinga. I am from Florida, visiting out of town. I'm a poet. I'm trying to think what piece I'm going to do real fast. Okay, this piece is entitled Anosognosia. I'm a neuroscience major, and it's a word that I encountered in one of my classes. And basically, it's to define a secondary condition where you have a neurological deficit and you have an unawareness of the fact that something is wrong with you. This is your occipital lobe. If you get a lesion in your occipital lobe, you might have cortical blindness. And with cortical blindness, you are blind, but you have hallucinations that you can see. So you have a neurological deficit, but you don't realize that something is wrong with you. So I decided to use this word in application to us, and so this is what I did. Africans of the diaspora are dealing with an epidemic. I am not talking about being physically sick. I am talking about a mental tic, one which is defined by an unawareness of a deficit. Psychologists diagnose this unawareness as anosognosia due to long-term transgenerational post-traumatic slave syndrome exposure. Black on black crime, a deficit unseen due to anosognosia. Little black girls and boys having children before their time, a deficit unseen due to anosognosia. Elders thrown in nursing homes instead of being kept near, a deficit unseen due to anosognosia. 400,000 babies aborted in our community each year, a deficit unseen due to anosognosia. Women who feel uncomfortable to demand their due respect, a deficit unseen due to anosognosia. Blacks who feel that unity with Africans or diaspora is a noose around their neck, a deficit unseen due to anosognosia. Women for aesthetic justifications deny their newborns their breast, a deficit unseen due to anosognosia. Black men who don't feel uncomfortable to be a deadbeat dad, a deficit unseen due to anosognosia. People who hear the word nigga and don't get mad, a deficit unseen due to anosognosia. Little black girls who only want white dolls, a deficit unseen due to anosognosia. People behind on their bills but spend hundreds of dollars at the mall, a deficit unseen due to anosognosia. Women who refer to themselves as the baddest bitch, a deficit unseen due to anosognosia. Those who voted for Bush based on his moral pitch, a deficit unseen due to anosognosia. People who think that color doesn't matter, a deficit unseen due to anosognosia. Those who think our situation is getting better instead of sadder, a deficit unseen due to anosognosia. The oppressed worshiping their oppressors, a deficit unseen due to anosognosia. Tolerance for men who are child molesters, a deficit unseen due to anosognosia. Light-skinned people who hold their ancestors' rapists as a prize, a deficit unseen due to anosognosia. Those who feel it easier to live with a veil over their eyes, a deficit unseen due to anosognosia. Africans of the diaspora are dealing with an epidemic. I am not talking about being physically sick. I am talking about a mental tic, one which is defined by an unawareness of a deficit. Psychologists diagnose this unawareness as anosognosia is due to long-term, transgenerational, post-traumatic slave syndrome exposure. Peace. And I do have CDs available.
Enjoying the program? Oh, yeah. Give all the artists a round of applause. Yes, yes. We have a very special guest coming in to honor also, along with everyone else, Sister Laini. And so will you all with me please welcome Brother Haru.
Good afternoon. Listen, I found out that I got an email a couple weeks ago, and it said it's Laini Mataka Day. And the first thing came to mind was like, that's beautiful. But then I know the history of our people, and a lot of times we don't give people days until they've passed away. So, you know, I made a phone call to a couple people, says, Laini still alive? They say, yeah, sister's, she's still kicking. So then, you know, I got happy again. I didn't really come here to perform. I just wanted to give a strength to Laini, because I've heard about Laini for some time, since I started coming to DC and performing and linking up with the UNIA. Most of the people who are fixtures in this community know a fixture also in this community named Senghor. Everybody knows Senghor, right? Yeah, you can't not know Senghor and be black in DC. Senghor was like, you gotta meet this sister, she's bad, man, she's bad, you know, you gotta meet Laini, she's bad, you know, she's tough, man, she's mean, you know? And then one day it was Happily Natural Day in Richmond, and we were all carpooling to go because there was a group of performers, and Senghor said, this is Laini. And, you know, I saw her standing there, and just looking at her, I knew that this was a very serious sister. And then she performed and started speaking. And I knew that this was more than just a serious sister, it was a legendary sister. And I got sad for a moment, in the sense that for some time professionally now, and I'm saying to myself, why is it that I haven't heard of Laini much earlier in my life? She should be required reading for those of us who are just learning phonics. Why is it that I haven't heard a sister this great who is so non-compromising and so clear and so consistent? Why did it take me so many years to meet this sister and to hear of her works? And it was just a reflection of where we are in terms of who we decide to celebrate. A lot of times our heroes are molded for us and foisted in front of us and given recognition for us, and we just kind of follow along like sheep. You know, once someone hits the TV, then all of a sudden we know about the person. You know, we know about Maya Angelou, we know about these people, but there are other black artists who haven't gotten that type of exposure, who are just as great, just as profound, and sometimes, because of the fact that they haven't gotten the exposure, they haven't been compromised, and their message hasn't been compromised because they're not funded by white philanthropists. And I got Laini's books, and I read them, and I don't have her books anymore because I was reading it on a bus, and a sister was sitting next to me, and she started reading what I was reading, and she asked me, you know, about the book, and I just gave her the book. This happened to me twice now. So there's two random sisters from New York somewhere who got your book, Laini, who emailed me and told me that your book saved their lives. Seriously. It put their life into perspective. Each generation of black people have heroes and sheroes that rise up, that represent the best of who we are and who we're supposed to be, based on what our ancestors have dictated for us. Laini happens to be one of them. She uses poetry to change molecules. Many of us in this type of vocation don't really believe in poetry for poetry. We're using poetry as a weapon. We're using poetry to uplift the consciousness of our people. And if it wasn't for poetry, most of us would have picked up a gun and just become revolutionaries and changed molecules that way. But the fact that we can use our words and be creative and speak to our people has been something that has caused us to live longer and caused us to help our people live longer. Someone like Laini, the word poet probably is not even enough, because within the Americanization of art forms, when you use the word poet, it becomes something that's very laissez-faire. Roses are red, violets are blue, that's a poet. Someone who can write about anything and everything. And of course there's this semblance of freedom of speech. However, Laini comes from an African tradition. And in the African tradition, the West African tradition, where I come from in Ghana, we call people like Laini, we don't call them poets, we call them awenfo, which is a weaver of important words, not just a weaver of words, a weaver of important words. In the American tradition, a poet just means a weaver of words. In African tradition, a poet means weaver of important words. The poet in African tradition never proclaims that he or she is a poet, but is recognized as a poet by the people. You cannot call yourself a poet until people have designated you as such. You have to earn your stripes. Black. Descend and show my people how to defend and react, yo. Goddess of the perfect black. You're the one who got into the head of Kofi, renamed Fred, and said, yo, we are not turning back. Yo, goddess of the perfect black. Speak to my people who are no longer cognizant of who they are. Instead of aligning ourselves with cosmic stars, we've aligned ourselves with cosmetics and cars. Prosthetics of jail bars are stitched into the head of those who would choose and use and abuse tattoos to replace scars. Yes, Whitey's on the moon, and yes, Whitey is on Mars. And the universe was polluted once Hollywood became stars. Yes, Whitey's on the moon, and yes, Whitey is on Mars. But I'm sending out a universal caution. I've seen what crackers have done to the earth, so I'm rooting for the Martians. And you can call this intraspecies and intergalactic treason. You can call this intraspecies and intergalactic treason. She'll change her tactics every season. She's got my backing whenever she's reaching. She practices whatever she's preaching. There's nothing lacking in her teachings. She and I are double teaming, so we're screaming in agreement. When it comes to the sperm of my semen, scheming European human beings have been demons, so I use prophylactics for a reason. She'll change her tactics every season. She practices whenever she's reaching. There's nothing lacking in her teaching. She's got my backing whenever she's reaching. She and I are double teaming, so we're screaming in agreement. When it comes to the sperm of my semen, scheming European human beings have been demons, so I use prophylactics for a reason. She'll change her tactics every season. Until this world is made into the image of me. Until this world is made into the image of she. Until this world is made into the image of we. Black people is not every fruit that's part of your family tree. What about the ones that rot? What about the ones that got spots? What about the ones that forgot? What about the ones that think not? What about the ones that aspire not? What about the ones that admire not? Black people, it's not every single vegetable that reached the black kettle yaba pot. Race first. Give thanks. Goddess of the perfect black. Descend and show my people how to stop pretend. Yes, descend, yes, and defend and react, yo. Goddess of the perfect black. You're the one who got into the head of Kofi, renamed Fred, and said, yo, we are not turning back. Yo, goddess of the perfect black. You're the one who was taken from the Isles of Tranquility, only to be taken into the burial of captivity, and then you were abused in the barrel of captivity and used in the barrel of captivity, and you were raped in the barrel of captivity, and you escaped from the barrel of captivity only to return in the barrel of captivity, to burn in the barrel of captivity. And they asked you about the barrel of captivity when you were 90 years old. They asked you about the barrel of captivity, and you said that you freed hundreds from the barrel of captivity, but you could have freed thousands from the barrel of captivity only if they would have known that they were in a barrel of captivity. Economic barrel of captivity, spiritual barrel of captivity, physical barrel of captivity, burial of the captivity, burial of the captivity, burial of the captivity. Race first. Give thanks. Goddess of the perfect black. Descend and show my people how to stop pretend. Yes, defend and react, yo. Goddess of the perfect black. You're the one who got into the head of Kofi, renamed Fred, and said, yo, we are not turning back. Yo, goddess of the perfect black. You're the one who wrote that speech to blast them in them face. And yes, you did tote that two-shot piece to blast them in them face. And yes, you did blast them in the face. You never got weak and blast them in the face. You never did sleep and blast them in the face. Cause bare wickedness is what them I deal with. When the sufferers unite them, I go feel it. The warriors bring my heart to come reveal it. You could never win a race if you cheated. The hieroglyphics in specific never be deleted. The Dogon people of West Africa were never ever defeated. We know where the Queen of Righteousness is seated. We come to bust all their glass ceiling. Black people, we need more than just sexual healing. Race first, give thanks, goddess of the perfect black. Speak to my people who are no longer cognizant of who they are. Instead of aligning ourselves with cosmic stars, we've aligned ourselves with cosmetics and cars. Prosthetics of jail bars are stitched into the head of those who would choose and use and abuse tattoos to replace scars. Yes, Whitey's on the moon, and yes, Whitey is on Mars. Yes, Whitey's on the moon, and yes, Whitey is on Mars. Yes, Whitey's on the moon, and yes, Whitey is on Mars. The universe was polluted once Hollywood became stars. Yes, Whitey's on the moon, and yes, Whitey is on Mars. But I'm sending out a universal caution. I've seen what crackers have done to the earth, so I'm rooting for the Martians. And you can call this intraspecies an intergalactic treason. She'll change her tactics every season. She practiced whatever she's preaching. There's nothing lacking in her teaching. She's got my backing whenever she's reaching. She and I are double teaming, so we're screaming in agreement. When it comes to the sperm of my semen, some scheming European human beings have been demons, so I use prophylactics for a reason. She'll change her tactics every season. Goddess of the perfect black, descend and show my people how to defend and react. Yo, goddess of the perfect black. You're the one who got into the head of Kofi, renamed Fred, and said, yo, we are not turning back. Yo, goddess of the perfect black. Your name is much more than semantic, symbolic, or titular. The stories you tell of saviors never change. They're always similar. And the smell of traitors is strange, but also familiar. You're the calm of the storm that we're caught in the middle of. Nigga is a word reserved for those who would floss and lost their kingdom, said the ancient riddler. And cracker is a word reserved for those who would hijack and crack the backs of blacks to gain their own kingdom, said the ancient riddler. She said, I need reparations and I need your fibula. I need it for a ritual. Economic imperatives can also be spiritual. Embodiment of the physical is manifestation of the spiritual. She said, I need reparations and I need your fibula. Community concerns has gone from group to individual and singular. Singular and individual. Individual and singular. Yes, I need reparations and I need your fibula. Black history lessons is more than trivia. Yes, I need reparations and I need your fibula. I need it for a ritual. Embodiment of the physical is manifestation of the spiritual. Having vision is much more than just being visual. The universe ain't linear, yes, the universe is cyclical. Evidenced by the planets which move elliptical. Let mathematics be mathematical and science be scientifical. Tell me what happens when science goes political. Well, the earth being flat was strictly political. Ancient Egypt, not black, was strictly political. The descendants of rebellious Jamaicans and Haitians living in shacks is strictly political. Hip-hop not defending blacks is strictly political. Stop listening to rappers who are rapping about killing you. Let gangsters be gangsters and let lyricists be lyrical. African Americans, your love for America will never be reciprocal. Black Americans, your love for America will never be reciprocal. Black Americans, your love for America will never be reciprocal. Negro Americans, your love for America will never be reciprocal. Nigger Americans, your love for America will never be reciprocal. Did I cover all bases? Well, I hope you think so. One more thing. One more thing. The blood of Africa is the world's umbilical. Prove it, well, simple. The laws of the black goddess Mayat predate and inform everything biblical. Goddess of the perfect black. Now listen. And it's another one. I'm gonna do one more for Laini. Y'all all right? It's okay if I do one more for Laini? Oh, Senghor's in the house. Just talking about you, Senghor. How you doing? It's talking about how we met, how you introduced me to Laini at Happily Natural Day. That's the brother right there who does Happily Natural. Can you give him a round of applause? Brother Manifest. Yeah, we got so many bright lights in the house, man. Baba Hannibal Afrique. I haven't seen Baba Afrique in a while, man. Bless up, Baba Afrique. Got General Rashid in the house. Y'all don't know who General Rashid is? General, could you just please stand? Cheers, man. Got some serious people in the house, personal people that I know. And so it's great to be here. We got Warrior Queen in the house. We got Brother Ankaku in the house from Florida. We got a lot of people here, you know. It's a beautiful thing to see such old faces, you know? Yeah, that's how you met me, through Warrior Queen. All right. I'm going to do this piece called She's Got Grace. I hope that we do commit some economic violence today by buying all of Laini's books that she has with her. You know, because, you know, in the black communities, we have all these Chinese food stores, you know what I'm saying? But you know that in the Chinese or Chinatown, you can't set up a soul food joint, right? So they set up in our communities, and they set up all these things in our communities, and it's a form of economic violence because money's taken away from us and taken to build up other people's communities. So the way that you combat that is really committing economic violence of your own to support not just black people, but black conscious people, black people who have our liberation, our upliftment in mind, because every dollar you give Laini, you know it's not going to be used to support anything but us. You understand? Because when Laini gets the money, she's going to put out more material. She's going to do more books. You know that's what she's going to do. You know she's not going to go on a shopping spree at Saks Fifth Avenue. That's just not what Laini does. You understand what I'm saying? So make sure that you walk out of here with the Laini product. All right. All right. I'm going to do this piece, and this is another livocation to Laini. And this one is called She's Got Grace. It's okay? All right. She's got grace. She's the winner of the race, and yes, she's got mystique to match your face with an African place. We bust the case, cause in the end, Queen Nzinga will critique you. Yes, Laini will defeat you. We were lucky to be born black, like the black dot serendipitously sprinkled on a dice. Run, go tell them 7-Eleven. We gonna rise to the heavens like leaven yeast. We gonna speak the truth whether famine or feast, so that you know that a black woman and youth is the truth. Yes, the roots, yes, the fruits, yes, the first, not the worst, not the last, not the least. Look to the east, ganja smoke increase, bump the police. Brethren, sister, run, go tell them trample a beast. Yes, my truth runs naked and ugly like Lady Godiva. Babylon, if you don't like me, well then I don't like you neither. I'm tired of playing the fly while you play the spider, sucking the blood out of those who would dare to fly higher. White widow spider, the blood sucker is you, the blood lover is you, the wanna be undercover, no other blood brother is you. Who kills more than you, who steals more than you, who has guns more than you, who has funds more than you, who has gimmicks more than you, who runs politics more than you. You are the one who would clip the wings out of fledgling tenderlings and distort the harmonizing of hummingbirds who would love to sing. She's got grace. She's the winner of the race, and yes, she's got mystique to match your face with an African place. We bust the case, cause in the end, Queen Nzinga will defeat you. Yes, Laini will critique you. We're caught in a nest of betwixt and between, and between and betwixt. I see that technological warfare is for those who ain't built for no licks. Yes, white widow spider, the great divider, the hateful liar, the African continent, 52 nation divider, your Berlin conference divider, your internal net has your followers as fused at the hip, interconnected sheeple. HTTP originally means hunger takes a toll on people, people, sheeple. People, sheeple are chained at the tongue by a high-sprung, star-spangled, fake, patriotic, bubonic collar, and you've got the nerve to associate worldwide hunger with the ups and downs of your Masonic dollar. My people, if you understand the shake of the earthquake, then you would know that underground detonations by the U.S. Army caused a tsunami in the world to make a plate tectonic holler. We don't come to bow, we want reparations now. Yes, we have every right to rob from them, steal from them, take all of our ancient artifacts back from them, whether today, tomorrow, or right now. Get your reparations anyway, anyhow. Queen Nyabingi inspired the Mau Mau sounds of the Black Panther. Go. She's got grace. She's the winner of the race, and yes, she's got mystique too. Match your face with an African place. We bust the case, cause in the end, Queen Laini will critique you. Yes, she will defeat you. Our ancestors shall be the clouds. We shall be the lightning, and our children, they shall be the thunder. Our ancestors shall be the clouds. We shall be the lightning, and our children, they shall surely be the thunder. Aborted fetuses stillborn in fetal positions shall represent a malnutrition and the condition of our collective slumber. Take a seat, but first, why don't you pick a number? Sit down and meditate in all of their rape, pillage, and plunder. How they took the truth, inverted it, turned it upside down, and ripped it from the seam asunder. Still the whole world shall wonder why the world, yes, the world and the rain shall fall in a cataclysmic symphony, representing a teardrop shed from the pupils of the prophets, proclaiming prophesized victory, solutionizing and realizing that the only black people's names worth memorizing are those who spent their lives fighting against colonial tyranny, economically, spiritually, physically, specifically, in every blade of grass. Yes, every blade of grass shall represent resurrected spirits that rose in due season, and the soil shall be the foundational platform that supported the germination of every rebellious rebel who became a rebel for a rebellious reason, and the tree shall represent the Pan-African principle that shall not be moved, and even if severed from its branches, it shall maintain its nourishing roots. And the wind, yes, the wind shall sing songs of victories not yet won, and the depths of who we be, who we are, shall be kissed by the colors of the cascading sun. She's got grace. She's the winner of a race, and yes, she's got mystique too. If it's your lineage you want to trace, then match your face with an African place. We bust the case, cause in the end, Queen Laini will critique you. Queen Nzinga will defeat you. We breathe deeply. We smell the beauty of it all. And we decided that every single piece of ancient architecture made by our foreparents shall be our collective wailing wall. And all through the night, we dance the dance and trance the trance, the dance the dance, the trance the trance, and trance the dance, the dance, the trance, the trance, the dance, the dance, the trance, so that we may have the Shango spirit answer our beck and call. And I swear, the day that Peter Tosh died, there were 400 years of witnesses testifying to thunderclaps and lightning balls. And for once we were united, we were not divided. Yes, we decided, yes, we made a decision to create our own religion, where Marcus Garvey was the only begotten son of God, and the feminine name of God was revealed as Queen Nzinga of Matamba and Indoga. Queen Nzinga of modern day United Angola. Queen Nzinga, the front tooth, side tooth, original Gorgon sister soldier. Queen Nzinga, her name is more terrible than smallpox, botulism, or Ebola. Queen Nzinga, the front tooth, side tooth, original Gorgon sister soldier. Queen Nzinga is the eye of the beauty in the eye of the great beholder. Behold, her name is uttered and watch wickedness stutter and stop. And there was a chief prophetess named Asata, and yes, she stood. And she was the leader of the prophets who saw us through it all. And she said that the answers to the ancient mysteries are found in Hatshepsut's geometric hypostyle hall. And we Africans, we can't lose, we won't lose, we will never fall. She's got grace. She's the winner of the race, and yes, she's got mystique too. If it's your lineage you want to trace, if it's your lineage you want to trace, yes, if it's your lineage you want to trace, then match your face with an African place. We bust the case, 'cause in the end, Queen Laini will critique you. Thank you. Come on, Laini. Come on, come do something, please. Please, come do something, Laini. Please, come do something, Laini. That's what I came for. I didn't come here to perform. I came to listen to Laini. Those of you, there's some people in the house that are from out of town who have not had the pleasure of hearing Laini lay it down for y'all.
Yes.
Those of you who are aspiring poets and poetesses, get ready to see the way that it's supposed to be done. The way you're supposed to write about this thing. Sometimes it gets too black for some people, because a lot of our people are suffering from what I call ethnic fatigue. They get tired of being black because the burden is a little too heavy. So, though some of us aren't really tired, we run in a marathon, we're not sprinters, we're marathon runners. And one of our greatest marathon runners, she was doing this thing before it was cool to do this thing. She was doing this thing before you could make money doing this thing. She was doing this thing before a lot of us were even born. So, with my great pleasure. Oh, she has to use the restroom. Okay. Okay. All right. This brother's going to go on, and we're going to bring Laini up. I just wanted to make sure that she didn't leave here today, because it looked like she was getting the impression that she was not going to perform today, and that's unacceptable. So this brother's going to go on. Thank you for your kind listening. Thank you for your time, and please pick up a book from Laini, okay? Thank you.
Now I gotta wait till she comes back, because this is to her, so give her a minute or whatever. Anyway, I'll say something before I actually do my piece. I wrote a little piece. My name is Mamadi Nasuma, for those who may not know, and for a lot of people who didn't know that I used to write some time ago, and I still write, but I do a lot of lyrics more now with my group 2000 Black. And we've had the opportunity to allow Laini to put two of her pieces on our CD projects, Volume 1. And it's gone all around the world. We have it in Africa, on the islands, and across the United States. And when the brothers always hear that piece, why somebody is always bad-mouthing black men, they always call and talk about how powerful that piece is. I think she's about to come on. Okay. I had to wait for you, Laini, so I could do my tribute. Because I was saying, actually, hold on. We, and I'm trying to think, I got to go back because I'm trying to remember when we first met. You can't remember? Okay, well, I know it's been at least 15. Okay, Ujima, Red Braids, okay. And I've seen her around, and she's seen me around doing my work as terms of artists are concerned. And we had an opportunity when I talked to her, about doing something on 2000 Black. She naturally went to her town to do that. But then it was real interesting. I have to talk about this later. In her book, she said the black men whose kingdom she stood under, and I saw my name on there. I was like, okay, so I need to talk about that. But so that's an honor and a tribute to about her, and I need to know more about myself through you. So in doing that, I've come over to know in the years that, you know, a lot of artificials are artificial. And that's not what she is. Did y'all hear me? A lot of art officials are artificial. So when the word became flesh, and y'all saw Laini, somebody was breaking through this male patriarchal system when a black female Jesus was walking among us. Did y'all just hear what I said? Yeah. Breaking through these male patriarchal systems where the word became flesh and a female, and I saw Jesus walking among us. But it was always about the word. It really wasn't about the person. But in the same spirit as which she came. So I got a revelation this morning because I was just supposed to do a drum thing. So I said, I got this coming through, so I got to take heed. You know, as artists, we got to take heed to the revelation when it comes. And this is a little piece here, my tribute and honor to you, Laini. Because Laini is a walking meta-nature, a walking hieroglyph, who uses her pen as a sword and blessing us with her gift. So we can take it on up a little bit, Kat. She's a walking meta-nature, a walking hieroglyph, using her pen as a sword and her blessing as a gift, cutting through all the bullshit. The sea of visionaries standing like a pyramid over the top is her third eye. Many have come to her temple, finding the source of her light as she sits on the throne of truth and right. Hear the word like it was in the beginning, uncut, not translated out of the original tongue. No confused concoction clinging on just like Coltrane, blowing out demons, creating a new but old song. Supreme love, a love supreme. She's talking about soul, mind, and body, and not the bling, bling, bling. Words in harmony with life, a true scribe, and her voice is like Marley saying, stand up and fight. Listen with your inner ears, hear the spirit of your time as she's walking through the streets, walking in rhythm with the syncopated beat. She was born in a cradle, before poetry slams and before hip was hop. When she was born, to be was to bop. Before all the poetry slams and before hip was hop, when she was born, to be was to bop. That's something Shakespeare and Elvis never knew, and the clones like Elvis and Shakespeare and Eminem, they never had a clue. But the word became flesh, it became bond, it became walking on the streets. And she was always given the truth. The science of black words, black notes, a walking female, a walking sister, out of the book speaking in parables. Something Aesop knew, something Sonia knew, something Gil knew, something Nikki Giovanni knew, something all the poets and all the prophets knew, something Laini knows, something Laini knows. Vibe from the scribes, vibe from the scribes, vibe from the scribes. I hear it all the time, vibe from the scribes. Help us to see, vibe from the scribe, Laini. It's your legacy, vibe on scribe, help us to see. Vibe on scribe, set the captives free. Even when they don't want to hear it, you keep us near it. Peace and hotel.
Struggling with the reality of being human instead of being a myth, the strong black woman passed away. Without the slightest bit of hoopla. Medical sources say she died from naturally oppressive causes, but those who knew her and used her know that she died from being silent when she should have been screaming, smiling when she should have been raging. She died from being sick and not wanting anyone to know because her pain might inconvenience them. She died from an overdose of other people, clinging on to her when she didn't even have energy for herself. She died from loving men who didn't love themselves and could only offer her a crippled reflection. She died from raising children alone and being criticized for not doing a complete job. She died from the lies her grandmother told her mother and her mother told her about life, racism, and men. She died from being sexually abused as a child and having to take that truth everywhere she went, every day of her life. She died from taking that truth everywhere she went and having to take that truth everywhere she went, every day of her life, exchanging the humiliation for guilt and back again. She died from being battered by someone who claimed to love her, and she allowed the battering to go on to show that she loved him too. She died from asphyxiation, coughing up blood from secrets she kept trying to burn away instead of allowing herself the kind of nervous breakdown she was entitled to, but only white girls could afford. She died from being responsible because she was the last rung on the ladder and there was no one under her she could dump on. The strong black woman is dead. She died from the multiple births of children she never really wanted but was forced to have by the strangling morality of those around her. She died from being a mother at 15, a grandmother at 30, and an ancestor at 45. She died from being dragged down and sat upon by unevolved women posing as sisters. She died from pretending the life she was living was a Kodak moment instead of a 20th century post-slavery nightmare. She died from tolerating Mr. Pitiful just to have a man around the house. She died from the lack of orgasms because she never learned what made her body happy, and no one ever took the time to teach her. And sometimes, when she found arms that were tender, she died because they were the same gender. She died from sacrificing herself for everybody and everything when what she really wanted to do was be a singer or a dancer or some magnificent other. She died from lies of omission because she didn't want to be accused of bringing the black man down. She died from race memories of being snatched and raped and snatched and sold and snatched and bred and snatched and whipped and snatched and worked to death. She died from tributes from her counterpart, who should have been matching her efforts instead of showering her with dead words and empty songs. She died from myths that wouldn't allow her to show weakness without being chastised by the lazy and the hazy. She died from hiding her real feelings until they became monstrously hard and bitter enough to invade her womb and breast like angry tumors. She died from always lifting something from heavy boxes to refrigerators. The strong black woman is dead. She died from the punishments received from being honest about life, racism, and men. She died from being called a bitch for being verbal, a dyke for being assertive, and a whore for picking her own lovers. She died from never being enough of what men wanted or being too much for the men she wanted. She died from being too black and died again for not being black enough. She died from castration every time somebody thought of her as only a woman and treated her like less than a man. She died from being misinformed about her mind, her body, and the extent of her royal capabilities. She died from knees pressed too close together because respect was never a part of the foreplay that was being shoved at her. She died from loneliness in birthing rooms and aloneness in abortion centers. She died of shock in courtrooms where she sat alone watching her children legally lynched. She died in bathrooms with her veins busting open with self-hatred and neglect. She died in her mind, fighting life, racism, and men, while her body was carted away and stashed in a human warehouse for the spiritually mutilated. And sometimes when she refused to die, when she just refused to go out like that, she was killed by lethal images of blonde hair, blue eyes, and flat butts. rejected to death by the OJs, Quincy's, Portiers. Sometimes she was stomped to death by racism and sexism, executed by high-tech ignorance, while she carried the family in her belly, the community on her head, and the race on her back. Well, the strong, silent, shit-talking black woman is officially dead. Will the real queens, please? Will the real queens, please? Will the real queen, please, rise? Oh, you're real.
Good looking out, as my brother used to say. Thank you so much. If this had been done for Oscar Brown Jr., he wouldn't have died in bitterness. Okay. If this had been done more and more for Dr. Clark, he wouldn't have died taking so much anger with him. So I have to make this last a very long time. But I do want you to know that this stands between me and sometimes wanting to die. This stands between me and sometimes wishing that I had been ignorant enough to go in the opposite direction. Every time you do something like this, I feel like you're kind of tricking me into fighting for another 100 years. So, thank you, and I'm gonna do some new stuff. Okay? Thank you. Oh, this is nicely lit. You know why we wear glasses at this age? Because we have been straining our eyes for so many years under poor lighting. That's the truth. And once you get real good lighting, you suddenly don't need your glasses. Okay, so that and vanity are going to keep me from wearing the glasses. Okay. This is the one that I was able to get to in my family. You know what I mean? You always get like, they assign us one per family. Okay? And it's your duty before you die to get one more who'll do this after you're gone. So this is the one that was paying attention. Okay? Down. Give me some light. You've spoken about art. This is an ode to art. Wouldn't it be an astounding use of African ingenuity if we could pick up a mask or a statue, stare at it, meditate on it, and experience the exact same emotions that urged the artist to create it in the first place? And suppose we could then exchange that art for a mirror, stare at it, meditate on it, and experience the exact same emotions that made God delight in our conception. How impossible it would be then for us not to adore ourselves. In the beginning there was art, and the word was art, and art said, let there be hands that live to obey us as we chant rhythms to pound gold into a dinkra, fingers that listen as we sing the blueprints of things to be. Let there be hearts that genuflect in colors our magnificent mandates on sacred walls. Let there be voices that make our butts shake and earths quake, mouths devoted to blowing our healing tones into the spirits of broken life forms. Let there be legs to fly where only the wings of ancestors can take them, limbs that suspend physics with their speed and grace, till our messages are divined and codified. Let there be spirits that dervishly twirl and twirl and twirl and ascend at our request, souls that exist to serve our perpetual need for recreation. 3. When Africa retrieves her legacy of self-determination, when she is truly and not neo-colonially free, so our art will be. No longer caged in the cold sterility of European museums that boast of their theft and then make us pay to reunite with the manifestations of our own spiritual selves. When Africa rises this one last time and plants both feet eternally in the soil that is her own embodiment, when she finally stands ready to turn the tables on history in favor of her children who are now too ignorant to even call her mama, then all the handmade items of gossamer loveliness, the lavishly carved stools, the intoxicating yet masterful staffs, the luxurious cloths woven from priestly looms, the celestially inspired combs, and the breathtaking statues that were taken as criminally as their creators will come home. Jumping with wooden legs from the shelves of the so-and-so collection, exquisite statues will follow the drums home. Leaping from walls that deny their function, juju masks will hurl themselves towards the continent of their birth. Ceremonial wonders, castrated by disbelief, will again feel their power and hurry back to fulfill their purpose. Ritualistic figures meant for fertility, held hostage just for mockery, will answer the stirrings of their mojo and head for the motherland. I say, when Africa picks up her crown and declares all her children to be free, so then her art will also be. Blues. When the tsunami hit, your country said, we will give them $15 million. Okay? And when the other countries started to give their money, your country got so embarrassed that they said, well, we'll give them $20 more million. So what we get is 35 mil. The combined nickels and quarters Americans found in their couches last year. 35 mil. The salary of 3 NBA players for one season's work that doesn't even lead to the playoffs. 35 mil. The current rate of exchange for 30 pieces of silver dating back to the crucifixion. 35 mil. The fortuitous amount anyone can reach anywhere with just $1. 35 mil, less than the absurd cost that the one-eyed king spent on his own coronation. 35 mil, one day's box office receipts from the movie the day after. 35 mil, dogs in America spend that and double on their food, not to mention their clothes. 35 mil, the combined annual cost of Cosby cigars, Oprah's diets, Usher's dance lessons, Michael's lawyers, and Janet's makeovers. 35 mil, the numerical equivalent of contempt as calculated and veiled by the world's most contemptuous. The Salty Papa Blues. Too unevolved to be confused enough to be embarrassed about boldly adoring his daddy, he turned himself into an ocean, but his daddy, being a cool cat, had an aversion to water and was forced to seek the higher ground of somebody else's mama. And Junior learned to hate water and turned into a salty papa. They say one time, man, he even made Nina Simone cry. I don't know whether you were there at the museum for Native Americans. I'm sure if they had had their choice, they would have named it something else. They probably would have built it somewhere else and put a whole lot more something else inside of it. But anyway, the opening ceremony was unbelievable. If you were there, you saw Native Americans that you will never, ever again see in your life. You saw a procession that you will never be a part of again in your life. And at some later point in time, those who like to kill us will even tell us that these people never existed. Okay? But they were there, and they were there hard. They came from the lowest and the highest points of this hemisphere, letting memory lead. They followed the steps of ghost dancers, still iridescent from the glow of a lifestyle that has played possum for hundreds of tear-stained years. They marched like stars, staking out their place in the heavens. The spirits of their contributions came rising up out of the earth like turquoise steam. Clustered in groups like assorted gemstones, they raised the vibration of peace to such an extent that only a tsunami could break it down. They swept the sky with feathers, breaststroked the day with gold and amethyst, fed the hungry far beyond their minds could catch up, dazzled the hours with glimpses of vintage gods and star-impersonating goddesses that wept openly to be so proudly unveiled. All the statistics I had on them evaporated in the heat of a purging sun. There was no alcohol in their feathers, no diabetes in their moccasins, no domestic abuse in their leggings, no hatred painted on their faces, nothing but love. So much love, it had to be protected. So protected that the ignoble savages were roped off to the sides in a humongous attempt to keep them from infecting the natives like their ancestors did. You know, the black-eyed Susan is not just a flower, okay? Could have been a black-eyed Susan. If she hadn't been a mule always carrying shit like white men's seeds. Lips never knew a kiss. Even after 10 babies were yanked off of her tits and bit off to the highest pedophile. Sweet 26 and never been kissed. Been spread eagle, though, by Massa and his spawn. Never knew sex was something that a woman could possibly want. Never been held except down where rape took place first in the soul and then it spread out to poison whatever it could touch. And time calcified those rapes. We call them fibroids. Boy meets girl. I met him at a conference. We flirted with the same sessions, posed aloud the same questions, till finally I agreed to lunch so I could pick his brain, which turned out to be a pleasant place. And as part of dessert, it was only natural for him to ask me out, which I refused because, you see, he was white and ain't no monsters having no ball up in here. Absence. Oh, well, to follow that, you know only a cat woman could go to a monster's ball and come home with an Oscar, right? Okay. This is absent ears in the presence of hearing. When my father was alive, he couldn't tell me nothing. His decision to play an extra in my life instead of the hero made me deaf to every single thing he tried to tell me. And now that he's dead, man, I strain my ears to capture his slightest sounds. Menopause. If you're not there, you're gonna be. Sooner or later. Menopause. Men on pause. Pause on men. Stop bleeding. Stop dealing with things and people that make you bleed. Stop bleeding for others and reasons not your own. Menopause. Me. No pause for anything but me. The concrete Madonna. The concrete Madonna. Still looking good. The oldest hoe in the world stands in the middle of the harbor, begging the world for its tired and poor to crush into mush to feed her retarded son, Sam. Still looking good. The oldest whore in the world stands in the middle of the harbor, begging the world for its tired and poor to crush into mush to feed her retarded son, Sam. If you want a baby. When I was young, my family always had dogs. One would leave and another would come, and sometimes two would coexist. And I loved me some puppies, but I lost interest in them when they grew up because I didn't have any patience with them and I didn't know how to train them. And I couldn't understand why they wouldn't just do what I told them to do. In some ways, I was like a young girl with a baby. This is the taking of Persia. The first time they did her, they were just sowing radioactive seeds for future assaults. They didn't rape her right away. They wanted to break her down first. So they got their allies to hold her down for 12 years, reducing her access to the basics, food, medicine, water. And when she appeared too weak to resist, in front of the entire world, they pulled their missiles out of their pants and jammed her in the eyes, ears, nose, mouth, and vagina. And to be sure, they had everybody's attention. They turned her over, and of course, they clustered her right in the behinds. And now that all of her orifices have been repeatedly desecrated and contracts have been wrought to gather her enormous bleeding, the perps zip up their pants as if they were lifting sanctions. You know, some pieces can't be done in like one piece, all right? Katrina. Visitations of Katrina. I'm going to give them to you in parts, but every time I say thought, that's a brand new section of the poem coming up, okay? 14 days, 1,000 miseries later, and bodies were still being found trapped in deserted hospitals, trapped in abandoned jails, trapped in forsaken nursing homes, trapped on roofs, trapped in cars and floating homes. Folks who would never lay claim to $1 million portfolio died trapped in disbelief, trapped by outright neglect, trapped in poverty, trapped by bureaucracy, trapped by white gunslingers, trapped by smear campaigns, trapped by the unnational guard, trapped under far-sighted greed. Folks who 15 days ago were U.S. citizens died trapped like refugees in the cobweb corners of their own nation's concern, trapped in the diabolical grip of gentrification, trapped in the never-ending darkness of their black skins while their caretakers used their tax dollars to stuff democracy down unwilling Iraqi throats. Thought. Cuba, a baby gorilla, breastfed by the revolution, reared and homed by black hands, a bodacious speck on the map of human geography, made famous by America's maniacal disdain and crippling embargoes, offered, in spite of the threats to kill it, to send 1,500 hurricane-trained doctors to the aid of New Orleans devastated. But the U.S. hates them so much and care about black people so little that they didn't even bother to officially refuse the offer. The suffering of all those Americans was preferable to the assistance of any kind from a country that refuses to gap its legs open for a red, white, and blue reception. But if the displaced had been Yankees proper, the U.S. would have stormed into Cuba like Schwarzenegger just to take the country's medical staff hostage, despite the fact that the people would have been willing to help. Thought. Venezuela. Courageous survivor of a U.S.-backed coup, a nation fresh out of lockdown, offered, in spite of anti-democratic efforts to kill its president, to send gallons of oil to help relieve the fake scarcity blamed on Katrina. But the U.S., like their religious advisor, Pat Robertson, wants to see Hugo Chavez dead, so they treat him like Fidel, crafting lies so raggedy only a cretin would believe. But the black gold was denied passage to those black souls because it says in the Halliburton Commandments, "Thou shalt have no other God before me." Yet if the displaced had leaned more towards vanilla than chocolate, Uncle Sam would have taken said oil, assassinated Chavez, and pilfered the rest. Thought. England. The home of mad dogs and scurrilous men, the estranged mother of Uncle Sam, sent 100,000 UN-approved meals to the victims of Katrina. But the U.S. claims the food isn't fit for human consumption, even though it's finger-licking good for British and American soldiers fighting to die in Iraq. And instead of sending it where it might benefit somebody else, the U.S. wants to burn it. Because this is America, and we don't need help from outsiders to feed insiders that we have already marked for destruction. Thought. Spain proffered foodstuffs. Wasn't good enough. Italy sent mega groceries. Wasn't good enough. Israel sent gallons of pear juice. Wasn't good enough. Before Katrina, the U.S. didn't care if the folks in the New Orleans outback ate alligators or whether the alligators ate them. That government ran around like Larry and Curly trying to find Mo, and suddenly the only food unfit for consumption was food meant for the people called refugees because their homes sailed off and left them. Thought. When the levees began to sag like things ignored tend to do, and the wood buckled and strained like Cheney's bank accounts, seals, alien to the Gulf, were sent to put them out of their misery. Do I have to read that again?
Yeah, one more time.
When the leaves when the levees began to sag like things ignored tend to do, and the wood buckled and strained like Cheney's bank accounts, seals, alien to the Gulf, were sent to put them out of their misery. Thought. Black folks are the leading experts in memory lapses that extend over centuries of abuse and infinities of suffering. Those orphans did not quarantine us in the stupor dome. That was not us being passed over by the helicopters. We were not waist-high in feces, blood, and toxins. No way that was us lining up to board those buses. We were not forced into unknown and hostile territories. Come on now. We didn't really let ourselves be separated from our children. Now, guns in our faces had nothing to do with why we stopped trying to rescue each other. They weren't shooting at us. Maybe they were trying to get our attention. We're not the first people to be called refugees without leaving home. And what's black got to do with it anyway, the brain damaged always ask? Thought. When the origins of mental depravity are in question, sooner or later, the mystery will always point towards the source. Behold the astute comments of Barbara B., the Marie Antoinette of our times. Thought. Unbearable heat. Every moment is heavily laden with the crystal clear audio sounds of other people's crying and screaming. No sanitation, no privacy, no electricity, no food, no water, no Africa, America. And I hope it's finally, I gotta feel this is finished. Thought. We are still in the middle of this passage, only now the drug is wearing off. And even our most devoted handkerchief heads must admit secretly, if not out loud, that if the victims hadn't been so black and blue, the Navy and the Coast Guard would have stopped the Earth's rotation to airdrop life preservers and rubber rafts over the flooded areas. And before hunger could threaten one pale stomach, the restaurants in the French Quarter, instead of letting vast quantities of food rot, would have been stuffing meals into every lipless mouth they could find. But then, if they had been of European ancestry, the idea of making the levees in the industrial sections stronger than the ones in the residential areas would never have occurred. If the displaced hadn't been so black and blue, the USS Baton, which was idling nearby, would have declared war on Katrina in a heartbeat, would have sent their 1,200-man crew out to issue food and water while using their helicopters to airlift the wounded for treatment in their 600-bed state-of-the-goddamn-art hospital, okay? If the 9th Ward hadn't been so terribly black and blue, Homeland Security would be involved in an all-out investigation as to why. And the barge was catapulted into the wall of the industrial canal, causing the deaths of hundreds of innocent beings whose only crime was living on land coveted by Mr. Bobo. If the traumatized hadn't been so black and so terribly blue, when they were allowed by the pit bull police, the Guard, and the Blackwater mercenaries to finally return to their homes, their meager belongings would not have been strewn out all over the ground, and their apartments would not have been occupied by strangers looking out the window at them with contempt and paying no rent. 28,000 blue eyes and blonde heads would not be existing in shelters a month after any kind of American disaster, especially while 38,000 empty public housing units sit around staring at each other. If the black folks hadn't been so eternally black and blue, if the First Nations people hadn't been so ridiculously disadvantaged, if the Cajuns hadn't been so much of an embarrassment, if the Latinos hadn't been so mixed in their blood, maybe their government would not have blocked the humanitarian efforts of others to save them. His father, okay, is Uncle Music. Okay. When he was young and used to wear silks, as a teeny bopping hustler selling cigarettes out of a red wagon to support his eccentric belief that socks should only be worn one time and then thrown away. During the doo-wop 50s, he talked his parents into buying him a brand new trumpet, which he blew all around the house until his lips got tired and decided that they were better suited for kissing sweet young things with stars in their eyes and unchained rhythms in their hips. He was all of the tall, tough, and talented Temptations rolled into one. He hummed like Paul. He sang in false like Eddie. He screamed like David and harmonized like Otis. But the only thing he could do with Melvin was say, Swinging from church to church, the way the Tempting Tees went from club to club, he was James Cleveland's emissary in B-more. He followed the sounds of the mighty clouds of joy until he found himself bare at Shirley Caesar's door, begging for more. Uncle Music was my own private DJ, my own moon man, my personal Johnny-O, the in-house DJ charged with tuning my ears, and on any given day, he'd spin songs into a lesson that taught my spine to embrace the bass, taught my eyes to see through tenor, taught my mouth to taste soprano, taught my ears to track down the melody and the miraculous breathing of any living thing. Uncle Music was the master of sound sculpture, shaping whole notes into medicine that he spread over all the wounds incurred from being chocolate mocha in a very vanilla world. Wounds that scarred the soul due to a no-nonsense father who was cut down by ghetto drama before he could even borrow his aftershave. He could have been a musicologist had he known there was such a door to knock on. He could have been a singing sensation if he had trusted his wings enough to fly farther away from the nest. But instead, he was just an ordinary man. He was the sixth temptation, if you will, crooning softly in the shadows with a gifted ear, a hungry voice, and a pocket full of shouldas and a collection of LPs so intriguing that they kept the young girl that was me off the streets and in his makeshift Motown where together we sat handcrafting my dreams. Because certain people read other poems, I ain't got to read those today. But we could not do this. I mean, were you there when they crucified my Lord? If we rounded up all the men in the nation and scrutinized them to the nth degree, we still wouldn't find one Malcolm. If we took all the speeches spoken by all the black leaders since 1965, they could not illuminate our reality more than the words left by Malcolm. If we combined all of the post-Garvey fears of white people and laid them down at the feet of the one whose truths terrorized them the most, it would have to be Malcolm. For Malcolm was our Lord of liberation. He was the alpha and omega of black manhood, the answer to the mystery of the Sphinx, the uncontested paradigm of metamorphosis, the first pharaoh to unite upper and lower self, the Buddha of ebony consciousness, the Christ of analytical persuasion. Did he walk on water? No, he walked on fire. Did he feed the masses with 7 loaves and 7 fish? No, he fed the hungry minds with facts and figures. Did he make the lame walk? No, he made the challenged realize their power. Did he suffer the little children to come unto him? No, he took healing to the streets and embraced all ages. Did he challenge the scribes and the Pharisees? He debated with all of racist America and trapped them in the nets of their own lies. Did he raise Lazarus from the dead? Hell no. He raised 1 million Lazarus from 1 million ghetto graves. Did he teach his people to love their enemies? He showed his people how to love themselves. Did he rise from death after the 3rd day? No, he stripped death of its power and stepped into the glory field of his peerless ancestors. Were you there when they crucified my Lord? Were you in the house when Uncle Tomism came full circle to surround our Prince of Peace? Were you on your way to the ballroom when the lowlife, the punk-ass pistoleros took their seats? Where was security when our Lord entered his final hours? Where were the police when time and circumstances descended upon our anointed one? Where was Elijah when his real son was being lined up on the cross? Were you there when they crucified my Lord? Were you behind the stage when destiny lured him out into the open? Were you sitting near his children when fatherlessness claimed them? Did you smell the fear in his stomach as he pressed forward into infinity? Were his eyes glassy? Were his movements jerky? When he assalamu alaikum, did he stutter? When somebody screamed, "Get your hand out of my pocket," did you jump? When the thunder of shotguns filled the Audubon ballroom, did you hit the floor or did you run away towards the door? When his blood burst forth from the various holes, did you go into shock? Did you throw up? Or were you too paralyzed to move when his body felt limp and slid down to the floor? Where were the CPR trainees? Where was the FOI? Where was the OAAU? Where was Farrakhan? Where was Shorty? Where were the Warriors? Where was New York's finest? Where were the FBI infiltrators? Where was Elijah? Where was Justice? Where was Allah? Farrakhan to profane Mosque number 7 by letting one of Malcolm's convicted murderers take over the very temple that he built into prominence. We are guilty of letting America badmouth him and then put his face on a postage stamp. We are guilty of not making his birthday a universal holiday. We are guilty of not loving him half as much as he passionately loved us. And if anybody out there thinks that Malcolm was not one of the greatest, most fearless warrior scholars of this century, then my friend, you've been misled, bamboozled, hoodwinked. This is Untitled. If you can't imagine a slave thinking that slavery was good or that one massa was better than another, imagine black people favoring the Democrats over the Republicans. You want to talk about lineage, Francis Welsing style? Suppose we discovered that Donald Duck was really the son of Minnie and Mickey Mouse. We would have a whole new slant on Disneyland then, wouldn't we? They're talking so much about illnesses coming, but there have been some plagues that have already come and gone and come and stayed. The plague, worms in the wheat, rats in the pantry, roaches in your bed, Germans in the Caribbean. How many more analogies do you need?
Oh, God. Yeah.
Haikus. This is young love in retrospect. 1. I was a peach and a mango at the same time, so pluckably sweet. 1 sly-eyed glance was all you had to give, and I was yours for lifetimes. Several women away from you, I still knew my worth in your sight. You wanted to get high, and my love was so pure, only death alone could cut it. What death does not mean is that you can leave me here, cloning you with tears. And 6, when you find your home among the clouds, I will eventually come. Haikus of a more serious nature. Bosnia. Rape death camps 10, 12 times a day till knocked up by seed that hates you. Haiti. Where's your magic? Where are the bones and feathers that used to have your back? Cuba. Yielding to nothing and fearing no one, resisting and breathing are the same. Nigeria. Abiola and Abacha drank from the same cup of UST. Japan. World's authority on how to be blown up and put back together. El Salvador. Those who did not die appear are here, surviving till Mayans rule again. Russia, now doing worse than real communism ever would have treated them. Tupac, Beauty and the Beast roamed in and out. Beast took charge. Beauty, suicide. Truth, we are still going through the middle passage, except now we've got TV. Africa. Africa is always at the crossroads, always certain to be crossed. Genocide. Kill all the blacks in the world, Africa will still flow through your veins. What's up? What's up? Somebody tell me, because I've been nursing low too long to know. A dog is a man's best friend. Yo, dog, let's go pee and mark out the corner. Red, white, and blue. America ain't the country it used to be because it never was. An ounce of prevention. Hug and love your children so they won't have to end up on Jerry Springer.
Leave it to. Yeah.
we're waiting to get some more of these. But until then, there was a brother, matter of fact, he's got a stand across the street in front of Howard. We didn't really know each other. We just got in a little conversation one day, and he knew that I did some writing. So he said, you know what, you ought to write a poem about how women won't let their baby daddies see their children. Okay. Murder. Tell me, my sister, have you committed murder lately? Have you swallowed poison, lost your mind, and kept a child away from its father lately? Have you put yourself first by bad-mouthing someone whose touch you know you used to die for? Have you become hard and bitter and ugly because you felt compelled to murder the memory of a man whose love you couldn't keep? Have you murdered your son lately? Have you taken his future as a man and tied it to the railroad tracks because his father failed to love you back forever? Have you robbed your daughter of a positive relationship with the first man she would ever know? Have you killed her desire to love a man by recounting war stories that still have you shell-shocked beyond belief? Have you murdered anybody lately? Have you drawn and courted anyone lately? Not because they couldn't pay child support, but because they left you for higher heights. Not because they now whisper promises in a new ear, but because no one whispers anything in your ear. Have you kept a child away from his father lately? Not because the father was a junkie, a rapist, a child molester, a basher, a walking, talking horror story, but because you want to hurt him. Because you can't find any place to dispose of your pain. Have you put your child's life and future development in jeopardy because you can't get past your own pain? Come on, sister, do I have to ask you again? Have you committed murder lately? Have you kept a black man away from his child? Okay. I love this. It's so short. So you found out he slept with somebody else, huh? And I'm sorry, okay? But her name is not B, slut, or hoe. Sometimes the other woman is just another woman who wants what you want. So you found out you're not the only one, and I'm really sorry about that. But at least you know about her. I mean, how do you think she's going to feel when she finally finds out about you, the other woman? And it doesn't matter what happens next, because in the end, you will still be sisters who tried to sip happiness from the same fountain. And you almost went to war until you realized it was the water that was no good. The term dreadful should never be put in front of dreads, but sometimes. So this is the dreadful dreads. Decorating the beaches like a rare and beautiful endangered species. Locks reaching out for help while white girls suck blood from your sexy veins. Never noticing for a moment the loss of memory, you flick your head back, whiplashing hair into a gesture of being hot shit, while your genitals are barbed wire to some white witch whose checkbook makes you come and whose baby blue eyes put you at ease and liberate you from the god-awful chore of having to be a real black man. Moving through the urban jungle, you stride like a lion, immersed in the glory of your simple self, as sisters interview you with their senses, and white girls flash the cash that will pay for your initiation into that great society of self-denying carnivores who praise Africa by day and mock the ancestors by night. Crowned with huge hunks of melanin-soaked hair, you give off an air of royalty as you strut into Nubian functions with little orphan Annie by your side dressed in African clothes. As if you really thought that your sperm could Africanize a cow's ear into being a silk purse. As if you really thought that you could take away her murderous ancestry. As if you really thought that our love for you would outweigh our memorable disdain for her. The price of ignorance is often death. But there are those like you who deserve special recognition, and so it shall be that your locks will be carefully wrapped around your balls as they remain forever on display in the dumb nigger section of the Colored Museum. Mark Dreadful Dreads. San Francisco breakdown. Out of the vaginas they jump, into the anuses they plunge. Love was somewhere in the corner having a nervous breakdown, and even lust is having a hard time explaining what's going on right now. Though I really do believe that all the poems that I write are love songs, okay? I do. Sometimes I do some straight up love songs, okay? And I hope I'm saying this right, because I think I got it. Dum ya bra, it means, if you love me, come, okay? My heart was meant to be played by a virtuoso, meant to be massaged with high, low notes of gut-wrenching joy. If you're afraid to hear the sounds of love, then unhand me and return me to the warmth of my own self. For me not to sing is agonizing death for me. Living in and out of the corners of each other's eyes, we've danced this dance too long, my brother. If you want a juju that will ensure your well-being till the end of never's ever, if you want life's unsurpassed voltage to breathe sweet lilies of wonder into your every vein, if you want a warrior queen to fight by your side till dust we both be, Dum ya bra, if you love me, come. What can I say to make you know that your presence on this planet is dangerously connected to my life support system? I'm tired of days that do not include you. Without your face to periodically grace the lackluster moments of my existence, I languish. Without your eyes to lick me up, I languish. Without a clue from you on how deep am I getting to you, baby, I languish. The ruby-filled sands of my hourglass are passionately descending. Dum ya bra, if you love me, come. If you ever come under my blanket, be ready to forget the moments you doubted my actuality. Be ready to forget the lucky nights you spent in unfamiliar boudoirs. If you ever wander into my hemisphere, be ready to forget the skins you took in desperation and kiss your loneliness goodbye. Dum ya bra, if you love me, come on. And for Paul Coates.
Thank you. Thank you. I didn't even have to ask for this. I always ask for this. Thank you, darling.
There are quite a few men like this. A man like Malcolm. Paul Coates is a man like Malcolm. Imani Lumumba. Single. Highly. There are so many men like Malcolm. And what's missing? The events that they could participate in to show us how Malcolm-like they are. But we shouldn't always need the, full-length feature film, okay? Because if you're watching a brother anywhere around you walking straight, continuously, every single day, you got a man like Malcolm, okay? So don't be looking all up in the heavens in the sky for one to be fine and be wearing mud cloth and have two dreadlocks down to his knees, okay? Because there's some other brothers hanging around who don't look like none of that. And they don't never even talk about being black and are it every single day, okay? So a man like Malcolm, I want a man like Malcolm to love black people with me, to be able to discuss Carter Woodson under the covers with me. I want a man like Malcolm to argue with until I have to go back to the library to make sure I know what I'm talking about. Okay? I want a man like Malcolm so that when I feel a hurried tummy urge coming on, I can go into action without having to worry about whether the person I sleep with has my back. I want a man like Malcolm to come home to after I've had a hard day of shaking the shit out of white people. I want a man like Malcolm to hold me the way he held all of us, tight against the chest, as if our existence revolved around him. I want a man like Malcolm with a red-hot spirit to fire me up into whatever form of steel my people need me to be. I want a man like Malcolm to love me with a fierceness that can be used to coat my backbone with an indelible substance that repels cowardice and selfishness. I want a man like Malcolm to grow with me into one incredibly sharp machete that slices away at the white cancer that consumes our race. I want a man like Malcolm to help me create a child so that in days of glory I can turn around and say, you know something, you just like your father. a promise. Said, I'll publish everything you ever write. And has not failed me in any way, shape, or form. This is not your average publisher-client relationship. At 3 o'clock in the morning on one of my birthdays, I had to call my publisher and tell him that I was thinking about suicide. My publisher said, I'm on my way. My publisher's wife woke up and said, I'm coming too. Okay? This is what kind of publisher I had. When I had not had money, my publisher had brought me food. Okay? Sometimes, in not having money, people are looking at me and going, well, you know, your books are selling. You think it's because, you know, you sure your publisher is like, you know, you sure they're not dipping into the tip? I owe them money. They don't owe, I owe them. Okay? You have relationships where after you get your royalties, you're supposed to buy your own books at half price. He doesn't allow me to buy my own books. Okay? How you run a publishing company like that? Out of love. People out of my aunt and uncle and grandparents' day. It's called Next Door. So she said, if you lose me, you lose a good thing. And he said, you're right. But there's so many good things. What could the loss of one good thing be to me? And she said, yeah? Well, somebody else may groove you, but nobody will ever love you like I do. And he said, baby, that might be true. But the things that these young girls can do, I mean, they make a man like me forget about love and you. And she said, well, if you feel that way, then F you too. And before she could make it to the door, he was on his usual place on the floor going, come on, baby. Come on, baby. And baby would come all week until he messed things up by staying out all night, and morning would break unevenly, and the neighbors could hear her say, you know, if you lose me, dot, dot, did it, dash. Love songs, I love a lot. This is the Dark Enchantment. He fired me up and told me not to take it personally. He fingered the sweet meat, though it was I who made the feast. And with a tongue that once belonged to the sun, he flame-licked my temple and made it glow long after all the tongues and all the suns had disappeared. For young people, not for young people, for any people, you are very blessed if you have someone at your side who reminds you how wonderful you are, you know. And this being wonderful doesn't necessarily have to show itself in accomplishments, you know, because for us to get up every day and still be black in a place that hates blackness, and to not be thinking of dying, to not be thinking about killing ourselves or killing somebody else, that is a wonderful, wonderful existence, okay? So this poem is, nobody ever bothered. Nobody ever told him. Nowhere along the booby-trapped road of his life did anybody ever tell him that there was something, some other way to live, and that that other way was wide open to him. Nobody ever tried to make him believe that inferiority was not his destiny. Nobody ever told him what he was good for or good at. And all he ever knew was all the things he couldn't do. Nobody ever showed him how to use the flow of time, not work against it. A little work or even a lot probably could have changed all the things he was bad at to things he could do if he wanted to. But nobody ever told him that success wears a mask and that that is not her true face. Reggie Jackson was not born playing baseball in his mother's womb. He had to learn, and then he had to work at what he learned, and the rest is his story. But nobody ever told him that work was not something to fear and hate and reject. Nobody ever tried to make him see that anybody he admired and wanted to be like had to work hard to be good at whatever it was they did that he thought was so hip in the first place. And nobody ever told him that life could be collared and brought down to eye level, that success wasn't nothing but a dance, and anybody who could handle breaking, popping, and locking could also handle algebra, chemistry, and computers. Nobody ever pulled him up. Not one time was he told that dreams are made to possibly come true. They may not always be able to feed you, but you can't live without them, and you don't have to. If I had known him, I would have told him to find something to love and master it. Learn to love to use your mind like you love to work that body. But I didn't know him. But it was obvious still that nobody ever told him that he was worth more than any material thing he could ever want, and he never gave himself credit for anything. So death was not unexpected. It came violently. He went out obscenely without ever being told. There was a time when we used to run to the Kilimanjaro. Well, this is called Reflections. We should be having the time of our lives. I mean, rock until the early morning hours, laughing home with the masculines of our choice, instead of watching the late movie, reading the bestseller among singles, and remembering the runnings before AIDS. Wherever they are now, I'm glad to have touched them all, broad and tall, slender and small. They never burned me. They didn't buy me things, but they didn't always treat me good, but they never beat me. They didn't always treat me fair, but they never cursed me. Yeah, well, they gave me trichomonas twice, but they never gave me a disease that wouldn't go away completely. And this is a very desolate song of gratitude to the lovers I have known without having had to pay the ultimate price. Just how traditional do we supposed to be? Sometimes relating to some brothers, especially from other countries, is like dealing with Neanderthals. I mean, a club on the head, the drag of your behinds, and true love abounds. The only time they want you to be a woman is in bed. Otherwise, be obedient, be humble, be quiet, be stupid, disappear, but don't take the puss. That you can entertain a thought and attract a sperm at the same time is inconceivable. Everybody knows that menstruation destroys brain cells over a long period of time. Be a woman who earns her own money. Be a woman who's aware of her own sexuality. Be a woman who can hold her own in most conversations, and you will be a woman alone. What we, the black he and she, have been to each other is the love story of the world's evolution. He who controlled the purse strings did not control all things. A sense of balance was our gift from the gods, and we gave it up at the evil insistence of some redneck MFs who just happened to be passing through Africa at the time. And now you want to ignore even the most blatant of facts. Here in what was 1987 and now 2005, you still want to talk about a woman's place? After one of the Kandasi queens personally challenged Alexander the Great at Ethiopia's border. After Nzinga used all aspects of her female self to fight and keep the Portuguese out of Angola. After Ya Asantewaa encouraged the sisters to kick butt and take their Ghanaianness back. After Harriet tripped and tricked White Death out of several hundred slaves whom she personally freed in spite of her sleeping sickness. After my grandmother worked 12 and 13 hours daily in other people's kitchens and singly raised the last of 6 kids and then me, you want to tell me about a woman's place? After I've been taking care of myself for almost 30 years? Being completely and responsible for my own self? Honey, the next time you say something to me about a woman's place, you better be asking a question. Every inch of space that I occupy is a woman's place. Everywhere I dare to stride is a woman's place. Everywhere I lay my head, everywhere I wrap my legs, everywhere I spread my dreads is a woman's place. Anywhere I shake my butt, anywhere I leave a thought, anywhere I leave a drop of blood, anywhere I conceive or delete is a woman's place. Anywhere I leave a footprint, a fingerprint, a body print, an image, or a scent is a woman's place. And I'm talking history here, because except for where penises bloom, show me a space that's not a woman's place, and I'll show you where you lost your mind. Sometimes I think I'm in charge of what I do. You know, sometimes I sit down and I say, well, today I'm going to write a poem about such and such. And my invisible muses are sitting up in the gallery going, what she think she going to do today? Okay. So I sit down and I said, well, I'm going to write about so-and-so. And they're like, right. And before I'm finished, whatever it was that they wanted to say, I've said it. Okay. They're not mine. They're not so much yours that you can go out and make money off of them and don't give me any, but they're not mine. All right. I happen to be wide open. They just slid right on through me, and I just slide them right on out to you, okay? I have a very pleasant relationship with my muse because they are the invisibles. We are the invisible ones, the original bones beneath the first flesh, the consecrated center dripping with the essence of all the blacks that ever. We are the invisible ones. We perform ethereal acrobatics of the highest magnitude to keep the worldwide computer from deleting the ebony hue right off your black backs or the coveted melanin right out of your genes. We, the invisible ones, have been with you longer than birth and almost as long as death. We were the friction that built your first fire, the notion in your mind to carve that first wheel. Our whispers financed your mathematics, and our love for you planted stone-encased miracles across the desert. Structures so designed for timelessness that the world would travel around itself and back again just to see what blackness had wrought. We, the invisible ones, have helped you win every crown you've ever strutted around in, have ridden with you into every battle that you were surprised to win. We've quenched you through more droughts than you could record. When those ships took your breath, we breathed for you. When your mind fled, we found it, nursed it, and brought it back to you. When you jumped overboard, we caught you. When you tried to starve, we fed you. And all we wanted in return was remembrance. We are the invisible ones who sponsor you unconditionally, support you everlastingly. We're not perfect, can't change night into day, but whatever we have at our disposal, we will use it to restore you to grace because we need you. We can't maintain our place among the ethers if you refuse to acknowledge us. We can't work our mojo if you won't call on us. We can't be God's emissaries if you won't believe in us. We are the invisible ones. We carried you like heroes to the other side of slavery. We gave you those fancy bootstraps, the ones with the civil rights in them, and we pressed your fist into the Black Power Manifesto, and we blessed you with a sacred pan to hold all your Africanisms. We, the invisible ones, are not too enchanted with you right about now. You keep forcing us to dance out the pain of unacknowledged miracles, make us bear witness to your adoration of everything, from George Washington to Reverend Moon. You've cut off that portion of your tongue that knows how to say our names, and when we try to come close, you treat us like ghosts. But we are the invisible ones who wait for those of you with cell phones to call on us for a real change and get a real exchange. We could help you more, but our power is directly connected to your belief and remembrance. We've got answers to questions you haven't even begun to ask, but you'd rather watch Oprah or ask Dr. Phil or get a spiritual reading from some exotically clad infidel with a bachelor's in Yoruba from AOL.com. We are the invisible ones, sitting on the millenniums as though they were Adinkra symbols. We can't survive without you, and you will never make it through the middle of this passage without us. So when you're in a bind, call us. When you're overwhelmed, give us a holler. When your pockets are getting thin, reach out for us. When you're about to go out into love, ask us. When you tumble out of love, lean on us. When you've got to go to court, retain us. Don't write your councilman. Don't search for a chat room. Don't email your high school mentor. Don't call on Tyrone. Don't call your girlfriends, your dog, your pusher, your parole officer, or your shrink. Call us. We ain't in the phone book. We in your blood. The invincible, the invisible, the inevitable, the only other power working for you that Whitey can't take away. Call on your ancestors, not tomorrow, but today. Thank you.
I'll give her this place and then really move out. Let me just say a few things for everybody to put this whole event in context. One, I was reading my father's book yesterday, a book he wrote during the Italian invasion during the Second World War of Ethiopia. And I wanted the chapter I was reading last night, and I don't know why, and then I realized as the event progressed, I knew that that was something in context to today's event, and that was an event that the Italians were gathering at one time. These Ethiopian musicians who play a certain instrument and sing ballads, and they put them together and really executed them. Summarily, they shot them. And so, as my father talked, and I was paying attention to this paragraph, it was about people who were at this time leaving the proper cities of Ethiopia and going to the woods to fight the Italians. And it was at the height of the guerrilla warfare against the Italian invasion during the Second World War. Ethiopia actually the Ethiopian-Italian War ushered the Second World War. And so I was saying, and then what the whole thing is about is really killing the musicians. And killing the musicians, they were trying to stop the flow of information of resistance, a flow of information of continuity, a flow of information of people's spiritual core center. And it does affect, until the musicians began to also go to the guerrilla fields, it did begin to make an impact on the Ethiopians' ability to repel the Italians. And so that took me back to the readings I have been doing on the actual historical fusion of the coming of Europe into Africa. And many historians really do not go into it because they're not really aware of the role of the artists. And I think that's why African intellectuals are caught in a vicious cycle of the fifth round of mental imperialism, because they never prepared themselves beyond armed struggle and political struggle for the cultural component of our people's struggle. And so what was very unique about the early Europeans coming into Africa was the attack they waged against the artists, the spiritual leaders, the wood carvers. The wood carvers were the custodians of the ancestral carving that Africans kept in universal concert with their ancestors. And it was an amazing systematic genocide of all the spiritual icons that were being burned by missionaries up to the turn of the century. In fact, there's even films, it went on till the 1950 and 60, where they were burning actually this monuments of ancestors. And at the time I became aware of this, I began a script called In the Eye of the Storm. It's about a warfare and how Europe intercepted and break the continuity of generational responsibility in retaining the continuity of ancestors. And so the talking drummers were also being hunted down and massacred if they are not converted into being translators for European colonialism. So even the drum entered the war where they had to either work for the colonial church, for the colonial missionaries, for the colonial idea, or else become fugitives and had to be hunted down and be killed. So the drummers were at the mercy of this conflict. The wood carvers, the spiritual leaders were condemned as heathens, and therefore, and these are the people who are the linguists who translated from generation to generation a sense of African continuity. And now I want to bring this back to what's happening to black people here and in Africa and in Latin America and in Europe. One of the most interesting thing is the fact that once you colonize the people's artists and you begin to make, in common concert, you begin to make them fabricate a virtual culture that is not necessarily of its origin, core origin, but something that, like for example, Nike and a hip hop artist would come and conjure up with. What you do is then you begin to transplant virtually their tongue to speak the status quo, for the upholding of the new fabricated reality of colonialism. And this is what's happening to a lot of our poets. This is what's happening to a lot of our singers. This is what's happening to a lot of our writers and storytellers, because the people who are supposed to sustain continuity are important either to be the servants and slaves and modern plantation slaves or fugitives. And this is a place for fugitives. And then we are honoring today one of the most important fugitives. And it's serious. I hope you really understand this implication. In honoring her, we honor all the Maroons. And it's not to denigrate underground, the Underground Railroad, but I think, to me, to look at the Underground Railroad without the Maroons, who also didn't ask permission nor wanted to go to anything but to a world they wanted to create, who are the Maroons, we then today are really honoring one of our Maroons.
Yeah.
And often what happens is this: black people, we are our worst enemy. And I know most of you came to honor her, but I'll tell you this. To me, we have to stop being gullible chorus singers for dead people, people who are gone. We have to actively claim and create institutions to make sure that African artists survive in the African communities wherever they are. Because the choice of the artist is to go work for Nike or for their people. But then, as human beings, caught up in this complex wave of economic and spiritual confusion, how long can they retain this commitment to a people that do not realize embracing me when I finish the movie does not make you my partner? I used to think so. Everybody hugged me. I talked about how many millions of black people hugged me when I finished Sankofa. But their hugging is fake, because I find myself worse than the time I made, the position I was in when I made Sankofa. So I learned to do something, and that is, at least on a minimum scale, that we keep our artists alive. Okay? Our sister today that you saw, you cannot believe, if you claim her every day, not just one day every other 10 years and then she's gone and then talk good about her, but if you claim her every day and her lookalikes every day under your nose, our community will survive. If you notice, in the inner cities that are devastated and bomb-shelled, there is not a single artist left. It's in exile, in fugitive territories, or in Paris, you know, because we have this thing that if we go to Europe, that, you know, we escape everything, and then we create a mythology of jazz artists who they thought they were free because they could marry white women. And thanks to her poetry, she puts everything neurotic about black neurotic people in perspective, and I felt, whoa, it's an amazing macro historical testimony to the time we lived, because she speaks about not only, she has the biography of everything in her poetry. She has the biography of Condoleezza Rice, you know, in a very out of focus, distant range Bush. We have the class system, she has it. The race system, she has it. The man-woman gender problem that we have never faced after the so-called Black Power movement. We have more grotesque men who have not gone through the rites of passage of manhood. She still challenged us to grow up, to become men instead of boys in a boy culture. She speaks about the rites of passage of men and how much women can teach us about everything, including how to love them, because we think we know how to love them without having gone through the wisdom and the rites of passage process of African women. And you know why, and I'm not mythologizing it. No man has ever understood himself until he begins to, you know, want a woman. And she, most good, great, you know, crazy and great women would slap the shit out of this men and make them be real men. So if you've seen, really, I know a lot of people would think you know, Elijah created Malcolm. No, his mother is, I think, a key. And read James Baldwin's screenplay if you want to know. And so women do a miracle in their proximity of, you know, life. And so all this is in her poetry. you know. And then she's, you know, she's this short, you know, woman, but you know, who commands a virtual height. As I think this, when I think about Queen Nzinga, I always think her to be playing the part, because this is a short woman. When you see her in the street, you go, "Hi, how you doing?" And then she reads her poetry. She's suddenly this huge. And where she puts all that sandwich together, I don't know. But anyway, I want to honor Paul here because he is what she said. He is what she said. But we have, I'm telling you, if we have 50 people like him, like Haki, 50 people, all our history will not be lost in the oblivion of our carelessness. It will be caught in print to be passed from generation to generation. And to me, I'm telling you, we don't want to be lost people. Our footprints should be recorded. We should honor our poets. We should make sure that we keep them in our community. We should claim them. They're claiming the spiritual role. Why not claim them to, you know, to affect them? And so today I just want to say to you, one, I would like you to buy all of you her books, but that's not enough. I'm actually, where's Sharik? Sharik, can you come a little bit? I am good I'm good beggar for people. I don't beg for myself. I'm a very proud person. I would never beg you. Never. Never in this country would you find me on my knees begging, but I'll beg for my people with pride. I've always done that. I'm a known pitcher for that. In fact, during Sankofa, one of the things we did was went around, raised some of the events for filmmakers. Filmmakers I knew needed more help than this whole attention I got. And so I'm proud of that. That's my good, resume, really, actually, amongst black filmmakers. And so I want to send my daughter, who's also becoming a new beggar with me. I'm going to send her around all of you. And I want you to put down concrete contribution for our sister to say, you are ours. Ours. To me, Kwame Ture dies from cancer at a time black people have more doctors, more scientists, more space travelers, and don't have a single clinic for him to check in. That is really a commentary. I think there were more black-oriented doctors and churches when there were only a handful. It's a tragic commentary on all of us, not pointing fingers, on all of us, on all of us. And so, for me, how come we don't have some of you, like we created the bookstore, the video store here, and a gathering place, however small. How come some of you do not organize yourself to subsidize, our artists? For, even as they get old, do we have old people for them, a home for them, or do we know how to keep them within our children, within the African context? Is there a program? No, most everybody's program, and I'm sorry to say that, including myself, our program is really in reaction to the system. We march in reaction to the system. Even March now for me is so passé. After the Martin Luther King, March even now is like a fake feel-good march, because then the inevitable, historically logical action seems to not come into our preview, which means economic, spiritual repositioning of our people for this inevitably complex world that is coming to conversion. We are the most unprepared. Unfortunately, white people logically are prepared for 200-300 years from now. Whatever is happening to European civilization, they are organized. There is not a single day they're not discussing what they will do 40, 50 years from now. They're discussing how to reposition themselves as China emerges. And yet, we are just the tanto of everybody's plan and organization. And so, to me, I think beyond helping her, we have to think about institutions that are viable, that have to prop up in our communities so Kwame Ture doesn't die. You fight for a people, you have no clinic.
Okay.
You compromise the struggle, you have everybody treating you, including Oprah, to a hospital. I don't get it. And so, please, go beyond the support of what you're going to do today, not to go move around. As I talk, don't worry.
We have another idea.
Okay.
Finish it.
Well, the other thing I just want to say here is, there's a book that Greg gave, that guy is Greg over there, is making me read by Elaine Brown.
Okay, or let me just present this and you.
Okay.
Awesome. Now give Hailey a round of applause.
I'm not finished.
Before Hailey goes on and on, we want to present Laini with some gifts of love from us, from Sankofa. Should we want to talk about the earrings? We'll talk about the basket. We'll talk about, okay. Most of you have heard me say I come from South Carolina. I come from the Charleston area. My hometown is a small town in Charleston County called Allendale. And right next to Allendale is Mount Pleasant. And along Highway 17 in Mount Pleasant, there are sweetgrass basket weavers and sweetgrass basket stands. My grandparents have a sweetgrass basket stand. My grandmother has transitioned, and my granddaddy is still here. My granddaddy is an entrepreneur. And so when I go home, I purchase his baskets. This is a very special basket because this is the first basket that Granddaddy signed. And we want to here present this gift from Sankofa to you, the sweetgrass basket. And Sharika's going to talk about the earrings here. Okay.
When I brought these today, in fact, I had to go back home and get them because I realized that I had to give these to Laini today. I was down at the Millions More March yesterday, and we saw this sister vending sort of illegally on the side of the street. She didn't pay the license fee or anything. And she was selling these at a very, very reasonable price, and I just fell in love with these earrings. And to me, the idea of them is so totally outrageous that I couldn't pass them by. And she was selling them very inexpensively. There was another young lady there who said, I want to buy all these. And she says, no, you can't buy all these. I'm going to sell these to people here. And then when the other young lady left, she says, you know, I knew she just wanted to buy all these so she could sell them herself. Right? And she says, no, I didn't pay for being here, but I want, so there's no sense of me passing on an expense that I don't have. And to me, you know, that made the earrings even that more special because that embodies a sense of purpose, an idea for being where you are, no matter what you are doing. If you're a scientist, if you're a poet, if you are a journalist, you have a purpose. You're doing it for a reason that goes much deeper and broader than just the business aspect of it. And I think that kind of rich meaning is what's kept us alive this long. I mean, there's no doubt about that. And Laini embodies that with me, so I hope she likes them. As Ackland would call them, our wild women earrings.
Okay, now, can you pass the basket, or the same basket could be used for this. So please, try your best, whatever you can, and you know, do whatever modest contribution. Checks, yeah, it's accepted. Put without, you know, yeah. Just make it out to her. Huh? Laini, yeah. Yeah. She's taking it already. Yeah. Okay, she's also going to sign the books. But anyway, Greg, what was the book you gave me by, by Elaine Brown. So I really, when I was listening to, I don't know what you think, when I was listening to Laini, I was reflecting in that book also, because it's amazing how two sisters, one in Atlanta and one here, acoustically make an amazing assessment of the time. One from like a sociological, political science, and Laini from the artist. And that was just to support my idea of how much that our poets really codify and and preserve the time we have lived and the time we've come from and the time we'll go to. And so it's very, very important to put that in context. Now, we're going to continue this kind of support, by the way, for other artists in the community. Once a month, we plan to do this kind of event to let them know that we care about them. And I know a lot of folks would say, we don't usually come here because you don't have around the Howard area, there's not a place we can relax, etc. As you can see now next door, and it's going to affect the whole that part, we're building a coffee shop for those black people who make excuses to, about not showing up here and going to like other white bookstores. So we will have our own, what do you call them, cafe bookstores in this area. And I hope by the time we finish, we'll have the grand opening that all of you will be here. Leave us your email address. And again, I want to thank all the poets, all the artists, the musicians that have come to support our sister. And the altar. Oh yeah, Paula, where is she? She's gone. And also the altar, the shrine that was made here on her tribute was done by the Adasi people. How many people know the Adasi heritage? And so we continue, I hope Adasi will join us in the future to identify artists once a month and support them and let them know that we care about them. Again, thank you. We should be here signing a book. Please have an informal discussion. You can move the chair around. You don't have to run out of the bookstore. Thank you very, very much. Yeah. And Aja, this Gichi woman, she don't like to be called Gichi. This Gala Warrior is a very important link, especially for this film I'm trying to do on Maroons. She has come in a good time for me to know there are still descendants living from those areas, because when you read this history, they look like they were exterminated. Then you see a sister like that, striving for, African independent adventure and all kinds of things. That's how she came here. I want to thank her for what she put together. And Tensaya here, stand up, this Ethiopian refugee who followed the old people like me. He's the one who's heading the coffee shop here. We're going to have a very nice Pan-African, environmentally Pan-African cafe here. So you don't have no excuse to frequent us. Thank you very, very much. Is there anything I forgot?